This is a story that's really been bothering me lately for absolutely no reason whatsoever. A few months back, I just had this dream that brought back this memory I tried to suppress growing up, but as of recently, it's been weighing on my mind. Growing up in 2005 on the edge of the suburbs, there was a large grove of trees and hills by some railway tracks that led to a big forest about half a mile from my house. When I was 9 years old, my neighborhood friends and I would ride our bikes to the railway tracks and walk to the forest to go explore the random pieces of furniture and junk in this peculiar forest. We'd play card games, do homework, and hang with friends out there for about an hour or two, but never sat out there too long. There were some small abandoned houses here and there in this forest that we stayed away from, as one neighborhood friend, Michael, told me there was a homeless man who lived in one of them, and if you saw him, you better run. So right off the bat, after hearing this, going near this house in the woods was scary as could be. One chilly November afternoon after school, I came home and dropped off my backpack at my house and immediately went to the woods. My bike was broken, so I walked. Michael had told me at school that day to meet him in this open area of the forest to play Pokemon with him. This was something we'd frequently do growing up, just to pass the time, until our parents got home at 4 p.m., so it was nothing out of the ordinary. As I crossed the railway tracks into the forest, I instantly felt a weird sensation, that feeling you feel when someone is obviously watching you. I looked all around and couldn't see anyone, so I thought I was just getting scared for no reason, as the rather overcast day was very eerie anyway. Trekking through the autumn leaves scattered across this large wooded area, I came upon the big open area where I was supposed to meet Michael. Near the area where we normally met was his notebook open. On the page was written, "Hey, I had to go back home and grab some batteries for my Game Boy. Wait for me here and I'll be back soon. Signed, Michael." I waited. Being alone, especially feeling like somebody was watching me, made this particular moment very uncomfortable. However, I convinced myself I was just being a wuss and decided to wait for him. I sat down and began playing my Game Boy. It wasn't too long until that sensation of being watched grew into utter paranoia. I kept frantically looking up from my Game Boy and checking my watch to see how long I'd been waiting. I'd been sitting there for about 30 minutes. It was beginning to get dark now. Then I heard some leaves crunch. I looked in the direction of the sound and briefly saw a dark hooded figure peeking from behind a few trees, hiding back behind them. My skin crawled and I immediately jumped up from where I was sitting and froze in my tracks, staring. I screamed hello to see if anybody was there. I was quickly reminded I wasn't alone when I saw this tall, dirty-looking hooded man peek back around from the trees. He called back, "Hey, buddy." I picked up Michael's notebook and ran for my life. I ran so fast, I barely had time to look behind me. However, I heard leaves crunching not too far behind. It was the man running after me. He was screaming for me to come back and, "I just wanted to talk to you. I'm sorry." I began crying as I was running, thinking this was exactly how those missing kids disappear. I ran and ran and ran until I literally tripped over the railway tracks and cut up my knees. Michael was just getting to the railway tracks. He saw me, dirty and bloody and crying hysterically, and I screamed at him to run. Without question, we ran all the way home. The hooded man was nowhere to be seen once we left the railway tracks. I last saw him standing in the woods, defeated that he couldn't catch me or something. I don't know. I told Michael everything and we never went back to the woods ever again. Years later in 2016, they bulldozed the woods and built a neighborhood there. We later found out from my fellow neighborhood friends who were in the area the same thing happened to them growing up. To this day, this is probably one of my scariest stories growing up. I'm 24 female and I decided to spend my day fly fishing on the river with some of my friends. What started out as a pretty common day of fishing ended up being a very uncomfortable one. My friends and I hit the river a little bit before noon. We have a specific spot that we usually go to that isn't frequented very often, but due to the weekend, they did have more people than normal. Not as much in comparison to other areas, but still more than usual here. There were 4 of us in total, but we scattered around the riverbank. For the most part, I had eyes on everyone though. Right next to where I had my stuff set up, a gentleman decided to lay his stuff down and even set up a folding chair near mine. I was fishing, so I didn't really care, but after I caught one, I went to put it in ice, and that's when this guy initiated conversation. He introduced himself and I gave him my name, but didn't offer much more. He started making small talk, which I'm not a fan of. I never know what to say. I grabbed a beer from one of our ice chests, and he asked if he could bum one. I feel that was a bit of a rude question, but I gave him one as a good gesture because it was a holiday weekend. We always usually end up making friends with somebody, and offering a beer or two is usually one of our customs as a group, so this wasn't extremely off. But people generally wait until we offer. That's the point I'm getting at. I got back in the river and cast my line out. He stood about 5 feet away from me and kept talking. I listened to him. Not that I had much choice, but gradually I started moving away from him. He kept following me, which is a big no-go for me. He started making some very inappropriate comments and asked me some very inappropriate questions. Some are as follows. Do you have a boyfriend? I'll probably be a lesbian after this, I'm thinking. Are you wearing a push-up bra? I'm wearing waders, so how the hell can you possibly get that inaccurate information, I thought. When was the last time, you did the dirty? Probably more recently than you did, I'm thinking. What's the biggest you've ever had? In this river, about a 10-pound largemouth. Duh, I know what you mean, and I'm not biting. You want to go and have some fun? I was having plenty of fun before you showed up. All of these things I'm thinking in my head, and some of them I'm saying. I got tired of the questions and him not taking the hint, so I moved downstream where one of my guy friends was. I told him this dude was bugging me, I needed to find a new spot. My friend started waddling out of the river to go and talk to him, but he had moved away by that time. With the guy gone, we were able to continue fishing in peace. After a couple of more hours on the river, we collected our belongings and headed back to the parking lot of the fly shop we parked at. Moving all of our gear back and forth took about an hour by itself, and in that time I noticed that the creep was still around. I told my friend about him again, but I stopped him and my other friend from going over to him. Didn't seem worth the trouble. Plus the guy stood at about 6'4" to 6'5" based on my observations, and I just didn't want anybody getting hurt on my behalf. After about another hour, we all parted ways for the time being, but we were going to meet up later to cook our catch. I went into the fly shop to grab a Coke, which left me as the only remaining one from my group. This is where the story gets scarier. I was at my truck and had removed my waders and threw them in the back. Then I grabbed a t-shirt from my bag to change into. Lo and behold, look who walks up. Here my dumbass is alone in a parking lot and not close enough to the shop to go for help, and this creep says, "Wow, fire titties," and then refers to my shorts as coochie cutters. He was getting dangerously close to me, so I told him to get away. When he continued, I officially felt threatened. Thankfully, your girl packed heat, and I grabbed my pistol from my truck door and gave it to him. 45 reasons that he would be making a mistake. He immediately turned around and said that he was joking, then proceeded to speed walk towards the tree line. So yeah, there I was, boots, shorts, and a sports bra, pointing a 45 at the ground and threatening a creep. Wouldn't my dad be proud of me? I drove away feeling surprisingly normal, but pulled over at one point and started crying. I hate crying. It's such a girl thing. I'm only kidding, I guess, but I pulled into a gas station on my way home when I saw a wildlife and fisheries agent, where I explained the encounter and filed a report. He told me that he would contact the sheriff's office, who did reach back out to me this morning, where I filed a separate report. Unfortunately, I know how police reports go, and I know this guy won't be investigated, but I think I dodged a bullet, and so did he. From now on, I'll be sure to keep company with me until I'm ready to leave. Ever since I was a kid, I remember my grandma denouncing horror of any kind. Halloween masks, haunted houses, and scary movies. I had attributed this aversion to her background in faith. She is Hispanic and a devout Catholic. She believes anything horror-related is wrong, evil, you name it. So imagine my shock and curiosity when my grandparents shared a bombshell. Back in 1974, my grandpa convinced my grandma to see the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This would be her first and last scary movie. The weekends after the movie, my grandpa, grandma, my then toddler-age mother, and my aunts and uncles decided they will go horseback riding for the first time. Since everybody lived in Wisconsin, my family made the journey to a farm about 2 hours away. For the most part, everybody is in high spirits. Who can say no to a family adventure on a crisp autumn Wisconsin day? Despite the others' excitement, my grandma is worried. Since she doesn't care for horses, she chooses to stay behind on her own with my mother. When my family arrives at the farm, it is 3 o'clock. According to my grandma, she watched everybody get saddled up and then slowly ride off into the tangle of trees. The guide leading my family called out that the ride would last less than 2 hours, mentioning different trails, the need for breaks, and things of that nature. My grandma figures everybody will be back by around 5 o'clock. She waits with my mother in the car, playing games, reading storybooks, and trying to silence her bubbling anxiety. Needless to say, 5 o'clock comes and goes. No sign of my family. By this time, my mom has fallen asleep, which leaves my grandma with no way to distract herself from her worries. Finally, when 6 o'clock rolls around, she calls to a farmland from her car window. No way is she leaving the safety of her vehicle. She demands to know why her family hasn't returned yet when 5 o'clock has long since passed. By now, darkness has begun bleeding into the Wisconsin sky. The farmland assures her that everything is okay and that extra paths are taken throughout the ride. He tells her that her family should return soon. Now keep in mind, this was well before cell phones were a thing. Also a week before, she had seen her first scary movie and it scared the heck out of her. At this point, my poor grandma feels like she's living out a scene from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. She tries to contain her worry and begins a hushed, fearful prayer, until the flash of lightning that is soon followed by ear-splitting thunder. The noise wakes my mom, who starts to cry. My grandma must now not only ponder the frightening question of where her family went, but she also has a stressed, howling 2-year-old to deal with. It is now reaching 7 o'clock. The storm is growing more ferocious by the second. My grandma has to pee and her bladder feels like it's going to explode, but between the roar of the storm and the images of crazed country maniacs plaguing her mind, she refuses to leave the vehicle. She plans in her head that if they aren't back by 7:30, she is going to leave and find the nearest gas station to phone for help. Again, no cell phones during these days. 7:30 comes and her family hasn't come out from the woods. As she is scrambling around the car for her keys, she realizes my grandpa never gave them to her. The pound of a fist against her window shakes her from a whirlwind of panic. That panic amplifies by a million when she notices a sizable, brawny man peering in at her. He is wearing a jacket and the hood covers his head. My grandma says that by now, it felt like somebody had pushed a button and sent the world into slow motion. Everything crawled by a snail's pace. "Why don't you and the little one come inside?" the man yells. His words are authoritative and carry no hint of warmth. He isn't speaking from a place of concern at all. He's ordering my grandma into the farmhouse. All my grandma can do is shout, "Where is my family?" The man responds gruffly, "We're looking for them." My grandma orders him to call the police. The next words the man said made my grandma literally piss her pants. "We don't need the police." As he turns to go back into his house, he says, "You and the baby can come inside whenever you are ready." My grandma starts sobbing, fully convinced that her family has been brutally murdered and that she and her baby will be next. In the chaos of this moment, she hears somebody calling her name, but because of the pitch-black darkness and her profound fear, she knows she must be hearing things. Then she hears her name again, this time even louder. "Dora, help me." It's my grandpa's voice. When she realizes this, she puts my mom in the back seat, grabs the wooden baseball bat my grandpa keeps under his seat, locks the doors, and then exits the car. "Keep calling my name. Can't see you," she cries. After what feels like an eternity, she follows my grandpa's voice to his location. When she gets to him, she realizes my grandpa needed help because he is guiding my aunt across the high rain-soaked grass. She had hurt her ankle. They are both drenched in mud and rain and covered in scratches. The rest of my family is nowhere in sight. Before my grandma can assume the worst, she hears my uncle calling for my grandpa. One by one, everybody shuffles out of the wild woods and through the tall grass. Everyone is soaked in mud and injured in some capacity. Cuts, gashes, limping, and unsteadiness. All are shaken up as well. When they finally make it back to their vehicles, the sounds of running engines and the flood of headlights get the attention of the man inside the farmhouse. The farm door swings open and the brawny man comes to stand on the porch, with an amused chuckle. He drawls, "Oh, you all made it out of there?" My grandpa shouts, "That dumb jerk left us out there and never came back." All the man says in response is, "I'll have to talk to him about that. You can all come inside." His freakishly flippant and joking attitude sinks into his words. He knows damn well they aren't going into his house. My grandma begs my grandpa to leave it and get them out of there. With that, my family tears out of there as fast as humanly possible. Once my family was back and home safe, my grandpa explained what had happened. During the ride, the guide led them deep into the woods to a creek where the horses stopped for a drink. As the horses rested, the guide told my family that he had to go do something and would be back in 20 minutes. My family thought this was strange, and my grandpa even anxiously joked, "You're coming back, right?" The guide simply gave a low chuckle and took off on his horse. 20 minutes came and went, and when the guide didn't return, my family continued to wait, as they had no idea where to go. They could see the sky blackening above them. They would have to make it out on their own. As my family rode off, they tried to remember the path back to the farm. They wandered aimlessly. Eventually, rain started to fall. Pulsing lightning and the crash of thunder spooked the horses. Everybody but my grandpa got thrown off their horses. When my grandpa climbed off his horse to help the others, his own horse galloped away as well. From there, it was a nightmare trying to navigate the woods while wounded and roaming through a thick void of darkness. The only advice I can give you is this: if you are going horseback riding, you better make sure it doesn't become a horseback ride from hell. I'm currently 27, female at the time of writing this, but the encounter I'm going to describe took place when I was 21. When I was 21, I moved to a new city for school. I didn't know anybody, and I was suffering your typical first time away from home loneliness. A lot of this had to do with being separated from my best friend for the first time, and I was desperate for some companionship. I took to dating apps to try and build some sort of bridge. I had a couple of dates which ultimately didn't work out, but I guess that isn't so important. I matched with this one guy. He seemed like the whole package. He was cute, and he was into music and art, and had a mutual love for Stephen King. We talked for a week, and eventually we exchanged numbers and continued talking in more depth. I was young and naive at the time, and to catch feelings for this guy, I honestly thought I was falling for him. We talked in depth for about another week. He got to know me very well, and it was very scary to me how much we had in common. We made a date to meet at the bar. He told me he was running a little bit late, and to go have a drink at the bar myself, and he would meet me there. It was sort of late afternoon, so the area was fairly empty. They had 2 other girls that showed up at the bar during my time there. One of the girls had broken her silence by saying that she was there for a first date with a really cute guy and she was nervous, and asked if I or the other girl had any advice for her. Oh, how crazy. I was there for a first date too that I was extremely excited about. The other girl was also there for a first date with a guy. We shared our thoughts and really hyped each other up. It was a total sister bonding moment. That was until we all drew the conclusion that we were all there to meet the same guy. Same pictures, different names, different personalities. This guy played us in a big way. Believe it or not, this was actually a huge letdown that turned into something good. The 3 of us ended up hitting it off naturally, and we actually stayed at the bar and talked. Since then, the 3 of us have become really close, and both are serving in my upcoming wedding. We just clicked over the mutual embarrassment. One of them actually lives with me now, and we truly became best friends. But on the subject now of my wedding. Over the weekend, I had my bachelorette party trip. My fiancé had his bachelor party trip over the weekend as well. He and his friends were staying at a fishing camp, while I and my friends were at an Airbnb not very far away. It wasn't a huge trip or anything like that. We just wanted to have a good time. Well, we were really enjoying ourselves. I had to go shopping one day at a nearby store where my longtime best friend and 2 other best friends joined me. Not to give TMI, but I had to buy a new bra, and that'll probably be relevant in a bit. That night we're playing Cards Against Humanity and having some drinks. It got to the portion of the evening where my mom wanted to go around the room so everybody could tell how they met me in a cringe story or anything they wanted to share. Wasn't looking forward to that, but it is customary, and did it lead to something? One of my best friends, one that I met in the bar, came forward for her turn and laid out the truth on the table. So apparently, that day, where the 3 of us showed up for a date with the same guy, was completely and meticulously orchestrated. She was having trouble making friends of her own, and she noticed me and the other girl at school. She made a fake dating profile after apparently hearing the 2 of us mentioning it at some point, and essentially stalked the app until she found us. This is how she got to know us, which is why we were able to hit it off so easily. She orchestrated the whole thing in order to make friends. Her cadence and her delivery of the story were so strange. So creepy. First of all, it was a big revelation, and it's a strong relationship built on deceit. I honestly felt very violated and uneasy. My mom cut through the tension by changing the subject. Later, I was out playing my guitar with my best friend and my other best friend. I'm sorry, I could have given them alternate names, came outside. We discussed it and also mutually agreed that it was really weird, and she picked a hell of a time to drop this as a bomb. So many things that once seemed so innocent started taking on a more creepy undertone. Just the day before, this girl was in the same fitting room as me, with my tits out while I was trying on bras. She has pictures of the 3 of us together on the mirror in her bedroom. I personally got out of that kind of thing in high school, but given the recent revelation, it just adds some ick to the mix for me. We've shared very intimate details about some of our lives, and I'm now wondering what's true and what's not. I called my fiancé that night and asked if I could see him. Not for the reason of what I described. I just missed him. He was thrown off by the story, didn't know how to feel about it, and also said he wouldn't have known what he would have done if one of his buddies did that to him. I feel betrayed. Maybe I'm overreacting, but if I am, I'm not the only one. I guess nobody got hurt, but it was a creepy way of taking advantage of 2 people who were vulnerable. I'm male 42, live just outside of Portland, Oregon, and I love going out on my own to have a beer and play pinball. I have an app on my phone that displays the locations of any pinball machines around me, and I used to wander around the city a lot before the pandemic, crawling between bars playing pinball. I'm married, but loud bars and pinball machines are not comfortable for my wife, and I've always enjoyed going out in Portland on my own and seeing where the night takes me. The Oregon mask mandate ended last week, and I only had a half day of work today, so I took the train into Portland with a hankering to play some Sopranos pinball. It has always been one of my favorite machines, partially because it is clever and full of innuendo, but also because I'm usually okay at it, meaning I can get enough free plays to pass a couple of hours on only a few dollars. So I arrive at the first bar where I normally play Sopranos, and I buy a beer and hit the head before feeding a couple dollars into the machine and getting started. It's immediately obvious that the machine is in need of maintenance, to the point that using my remaining credits was just a waste of time. I hadn't been out in a long time and I was determined to have a good time, so I pounded my beer and opened my pinball app to see if I could find another good machine nearby. I was surprised to see another bar within walking distance that also had Sopranos. I had never been to this particular spot, so I headed out immediately and double timed it. What should have been an 8 to 10 minute walk took over 20 due to a large area that was closed due to road construction, which forced me to go pretty far out of my way. The sun was setting and there was a huge group of blackbirds or sparrows that were flying around overhead. There were so many I actually jogged a bit to avoid the bird poop that I could hear splattering on the road nearby. The second bar was totally worth the walk, and it was a really fun spot I plan on going back to. The Sopranos machine there works great, and there was a guy feeding money into the jukebox and doing a great job creating everyone's playlist. I order a second beer and ask the bartender where the bathroom is, only to find out that it is closed due to a plumbing emergency. I already had to go really bad, so I thank the bartender, pay my tab, and check the pinball app again to see what else I can find nearby. I was doubly surprised to see that another nearby bar that I thought had permanently closed was back in business, and they also had a Sopranos machine too. Thankfully, this bar was a lot closer to the second bar than the second was to the first, and I made really good time getting there. The third bar is packed and has a great energy. I use the bathroom and head back to the bar to get a beer before walking through the crowd to the isolated small arcade in a room adjacent to the bar. I was ecstatic to find myself in a completely empty room containing a nearly mint condition Sopranos machine. I'm a couple drinks into my first game when a younger guy in his 20s or early 30s walks in and asks if I want to play doubles in the next game. I excitedly agree because I hadn't had the chance to play against somebody in a while. I honestly don't remember his name, but I introduced myself and he started talking to me about how he was from New York and felt like everybody spends too much time on their cell phones. The world is going to hell rant, you know the one. He seemed depressed and in need of some direction or guidance, which I wasn't going to judge him about, as I was pretty much the same when I was his age. I tried to engage him and brought up some examples from history where technology shook things up, but ultimately improved things on a global scale after some time. I asked him what brought him to Portland from New York, and that's when the conversation took a turn. He became really evasive and made some comments about Portland being just as bad as New York. My hackles went up a bit, and I grabbed a drink of my beer and started playing again to distract from the odd energy he was giving off to me. That's when he really freaked me out by letting me know that he had been following me for the first bar that I went to that night. At first, I didn't even really think about what he was saying until he talked about how crazy it was when those birds were flying over our heads, even though he was pursuing me without my knowledge at the time. He also described getting into an altercation with the bartenders at the second bar, which was just crazy because both bartenders had been really polite and apologetic about the bathrooms being out of order. The pinball machine in that bar gave me a view of the bar itself, so I would have seen any such altercation if it happened while I was there, so what he was describing must have happened after I left. He is still talking as I'm playing at this point, going on like we are already really close friends, even though at this point I'm just making sure I have all of my stuff on me so that I can leave as soon as my ball drains. Grab my jacket the moment the ball drops, give the guy a quick firm pat on the shoulder, and walk back to the bar and crowd as quickly as possible, before triple timing it back to the train station, taking as many turns as I could along the way. I made it to the train without incident, but the encounter has sat oddly with me since, so Mr. Everyone used their cell phone too much from New York, let's never meet again, and also stay away from my Sopranos pinball. Last Sunday, I was at my boyfriend's apartment for the weekend. He left to go to work at about 8 a.m. and gave me a hug. This woke me up By the time I could open my eyes, he was already out the door. He forgot to lock the apartment door on his way out, which I had not realized. I got up, put my contacts in, brushed my teeth, and put my workout clothes on, starting my day off right with some squats and crunches. Then I make some coffee and toast. Hop on the computer to look up hotels and restaurants my boyfriend and I could go to on our little in-state vacation. The entry door leads directly to the open kitchen and living room area, which is where his PC is. I hear the door handle turning and get excited, thinking my boyfriend is coming home for an early lunch at 10 a.m. The door quickly opens and an older man, 60s or 70s, steps in. My first thought is maybe he's the electrician that the landlord said would be stopping by soon. But how odd he didn't even knock, or... Oh wait, he's not wearing pants. Luckily, he was wearing underwear. This guy speed walked into the apartment with such a glossed over look. I was mostly polite in the beginning, saying, "Sir, who are you? What are you doing here? This isn't your apartment." I progressively began shouting and cussing him out though, but nothing would faze him. He went straight to the dining table and over to a large cardboard box my boyfriend had full of board games. He sat on them. Literally sat on the games, yes. It looked like he was going to take a dump on them. Then he tried lying down on the games. I got up and ran to the bathroom, scared for my safety, as I'm only like 5'2" and not as strong as I'd like to think. This guy was probably 6 foot and who knows how many drugs he was on. I dialed 911 and informed the operator everything that happened as I was shaking. She asked if I was able to safely leave the bathroom to let the police in. I said, "Oh, no need because it's unlocked, and that's how the guy got in," and gave a little laugh. She laughed too. I heard the cops at the door, but they were talking to each other. I opened the bathroom door and peeked in the living room. No guy. I was nervous about checking the bedroom because I'd have to go around the corner and wouldn't be able to see very well. Suddenly I hear, "Sir, where are your pants?" from the hallway. I'm standing right at the door to listen and texting my boyfriend everything that's just happened. They had the guy in cuffs and the drug he kept shouting that they were hurting his hands. The officers asked him where he lives and what he's doing here. The guy said where he lives like 7 streets away and he's trying to go to bed. My boyfriend came home shortly after and comforted me. We went downstairs to see if the police needed my statement before they took off with the guy. They said, "No, we already got it from 3 other people, and we found out that he went to every unlocked apartment he could." An officer walked by with a gallon Ziploc bag full of pill bottles. He found his pants and shoes in the hallway. So, lock your door, folks. A little backstory. In my late teens, I think 18 to 19, I was no longer getting along with my parents and decided to move out. I wasn't able to get very many hours at my job due to being a full-time college student, which meant at my already minimum wage job for the very few hours I got didn't give me much money at all. Due to limited funding, my now ex-boyfriend's mother invited me to live with them. Now on to the story. My now ex and his mom were very strange people. I later found out it was because he and she were on very large amounts of drugs. Let's just call her L and call him B, to avoid issues. Anyways, L and B had a lot of very strange friends that sometimes would come and stay at our house for weeks. I was always taught to be polite to guests growing up, even if they weren't your guest or even if they were overstaying their welcome, which is probably why things in this situation happened the way they did. L had decided since it was Saturday that she was going to do some grocery shopping and B had gone with her. I was asked to come along but wanted some space, so I opted to stay home and be alone. I was unaware we had a guest at this time and was slightly shocked when I came out of mine and B's bedroom to find a woman around my age chilling on the couch. Out of politeness, I greeted her and made small talk while pouring myself a bowl of cereal. We quickly became friends due to similar interests and similar tastes in music and movies. Everybody else hated scary movies except for her, so for the next 2 weeks, she was staying with us and I had somebody to watch them with and secretly drink beer with late at night while chatting about bands such as Poison, Motley Crue, and Aerosmith. It was pretty cool. One night we were playing a sort of game similar to Truth or Dare and she dared me to tell her the worst thing I'd ever done, which to this day is still shoplifting a lip gloss from the store when I was 13 and getting caught. Then I ratted out my friends who were also stealing so I wouldn't be the only one in trouble. I then asked her the same question. Her response was, "Well, I stabbed my mom and dad in their throat. I know I shouldn't have, but I just hated them." At first I was shocked and stunned into silence. Then I started laughing because that had to be a joke, right? She said yes, it was a joke, and then she and I both cracked up laughing at her weird sense of humor. When I got up the next morning, I went to have coffee and our guest was gone. I was a little bit bummed out, but figured she would come visit again. Most guests came and stayed multiple times a year. About 3 years went by. I had dumped B not long after this happened and moved back in with my family. I searched for this girl on Facebook off and on throughout those few years and was never able to find her. Then one day my stepdad showed me a news story on the Google homepage. It was about a couple who had been stabbed to death, in their homes, and about their daughter, the one who did it, finally being caught. When I saw the picture of the girl, I recognized her instantly. It was my friend. I never found her on Facebook because she gave me a fake name and a fake phone number. Okay, so I, 21 female, and my roommate and best friend, also 21 female, live in a rental house. I won't say our exact location, but it is in Texas, US. She and I are both practicing Wiccans. We do rituals and meditations and have weekly coven meetings. I can't stress enough how much Wicca is not a bad religion. Witchery is not really how it's depicted in fiction. We don't pray to the devil, we don't sacrifice animals, and we don't harm anyone. Being a pagan in Texas is hard enough. Thankfully, in our area, it's not really a big deal as we are close to a college town, but as it is everywhere else, we do have our bad people. So we live close to an older couple. We're not like right next door or anything, but like close enough to see them, if they're outside. I was doing some meditation in my second story bedroom, so it's about 110 degrees right here now. So I was in a state of half dress just to combat the heat. Later on in the day, the man that lives next door stopped me at my car and said that he saw me naked and praying to the devil. And that this was a nice community and we weren't welcome if we were going to practice that evil shit, I quote. I told him to get the heck out of my driveway as I was getting in the car. And he said something along the lines of, "Keep playing near the dog's bowl. Don't be surprised when the dog bites you." I just flipped him off and left. I'm not a mean person, but I have low tolerance for ignorance. Our roommate, who was a lot more introverted than I am, was confronted by the same guy's son who was a few years older than us, and he said that his mom was feeling scared because their cat had recently died and that she assumed that we were behind it. As two girls that have a cat ourselves, we were upset that anybody would think we were behind it. He also made mention that his dad had pointed out that he had seen me meditating in my room, but she had very wisely pointed out that he was the one looking through the window and that he wouldn't have actually been able to see anything unless he was making an honest and determined attempt to do so. This apparently angered him and he left. So we both wake up early this morning to run some errands before the heat got too bad. When we left, we found that all of our plants had been ripped out of the ground and thrown around the yard. Our squirrel feeder and bat house were also destroyed. Also, our cat's outside bed had been cut up with, I'm assuming, a knife. The biggest thing that bothered me was that a ceramic triple moon insignia that we have hung up on the side of our house was thrown into the yard and broken. Not only did we feel that our faith was attacked, but also our personal space. We called the police and filed a report. We told them everything that had happened with the neighbors, and they said without more evidence there was nothing they could do. This literally hit home for me. This isn't frickin' Salem. We're not here to hurt anyone. Anyways, just wanted to share what we were dealing with. I'll update if anything new comes up. This happened a few years ago when I was 20. I lived in a mid-sized college town with a pretty low crime rate. The apartment complex I lived in primarily housed students. Given that it was early August before fall classes officially began, the complex was empty. To make matters even worse, it was the brief period of time between August 1st, when leases ended, and August 15th, move-in day. So the only people at the apartment complex would be people that not only stayed in town for the summer, but also had renewed, or at least extended their leases. That being said, the complex was empty. Seriously, I swear there were maybe a handful of people living in this complex, which probably housed about 250 to 300 people during the school year, on that given night. That night, I was just chilling in the living room playing video games and doing whatever. All of my roommates had moved out a few days prior, so I was completely alone. Around 11:30 p.m., I was in the kitchen cleaning when I went to throw something away and noticed that the garbage can was almost overflowing. I took the bag out, immediately noticing that whatever fruit I had thrown away the other day was definitely starting to rot. And I went to open the front door when I suddenly was overcome with this feeling of dread, I suppose. I don't know quite how to explain it, but I just remember a feeling of coldness washing over me and my stomach sinking. My intuition was telling me that I shouldn't go outside. Of course, being the idiot that I am, I decided to ignore that intuition. primarily because the trash bag stank really bad and I didn't want to have it smell first thing in the morning tomorrow. Plus, the dumpster was right outside my building. It would take me 1 minute tops to take the trash out. So I gathered up the bag and headed outside. Since it was such a short walk, I decided to not put on any shoes. So here I am walking barefoot down the steps and into the parking lot, carrying a trash bag and a box of recycling, wearing shorts and a tank top when I noticed something off. The parking lot, which would have 25 to 30 cars in it normally, was empty except for my car and 2 other cars. The odd thing was that one of the other cars was on idling, with the headlights turned off. It was a white truck kind of beat up and old with a ladder on top and some boxes. Hard to tell. That parking lot had a grand total of 1 street lamp in the back. I thought it was odd because it definitely looked like a work truck given the ladder. There was no reason for that truck to be parked here at night, especially not with people in it. I was about halfway to the dumpster when I finally got close enough to see who was sitting inside the truck. From what I could tell, there was at least 2 men late 20s to early 30s sitting in the truck. The guy in the driver's seat closest to me didn't notice me initially, until the guy next to him pointed in my direction. As soon as that man turned towards me, my blood ran cold and I briefly paused. My gut was telling me to run back up into the apartment. Of course I didn't do that. I reasoned that perhaps they were waiting for someone, or maybe a drug deal. I thought it would look worse if I suddenly bolted instead of just throwing my trash away. So I continued walking towards the dumpster, trying to make it look like I didn't care about them and was just actually taking out the trash. All the while the 2 guys in the car continued to talk to each other, pointing and gesturing towards me. Couldn't make out what they were saying, but the window was rolled down so I could hear them talking. When I finally reached the dumpster, the 2 guys had gone silent. They were now just staring, leering more like. I slowly lifted the trash bag above the dumpster. As soon as I let go, the truck immediately reverses. That's when I say screw it, drop the box of recycling and take off running. I hear the tires of the truck literally squeal behind me as I'm sprinting across the parking lot. I hardly even notice the sharp pieces of rock and other debris that are stabbing into the soles of my feet as I run. I made the quick decision to run up a different staircase than the one I had come down in an effort to throw them off. I get back into my apartment, slam the door, and then lock and deadbolt it. I ran to the sliding glass door that leads out onto the balcony, made sure that it was locked, a little bit paranoid at this point, but hey, and then closed the blinds. I took a second to catch my breath before I realized that the blinds of my bedroom window are most likely open and my lights are on. I jogged to my bedroom, turned off my lamp, and then approached the window. That's when I noticed the truck, still no headlights, creeping through the parking lot. This one is on the opposite side of the first parking lot. The apartment building was situated in between them. It stops right underneath my window. I hit the ground as quickly as possible, hoping that they didn't see me. It's silent for a few moments before I hear someone shout something that sounds suspiciously like, "Damn it." I didn't dare look out the window again. I just sat there curled into a ball on the floor of my bedroom. After a few minutes, the sound of the truck's engine faded. I peeked out the window and was thankfully met with the sight of an empty parking lot. I didn't sleep that night. I had a few other encounters during the 2 years I lived at this apartment, but this one by far remains the scariest. The one good thing I took from this experience is to trust my intuition, even if I can come up with reasons against it. I have no idea what these guys were doing in the parking lot that night, nor do I have any idea why they chased after me. There is one person I've met in my life that I'm absolutely positive was a psychopath, and it was a 10-year-old little girl. The summer after I graduated college, I was living in a house in Berkeley with a few PhD students. It wasn't in the best neighborhood, but it wasn't the worst either, I guess. There were a few families living in the neighborhood, including the people in the house next to us. It seemed like a reasonably nice 2-story house, but on several occasions, there were police cars and/or ambulances outside the house. We never really questioned why, as police cars weren't a rare sight in the area, and we had only ever seen a young girl and her mom at the house, so there was nothing overtly abnormal or concerning. One afternoon, my roommates and I had just finished smoking a joint in our backyard when we heard a knock at the door. I open it and it's the mother from next door. I was a bit taken aback, and even more so when she said, "Hi, I wanted to ask you guys something. I really don't want to have to call the police." At this point, I'm thinking she must have seen or smelled us smoking weed, and while it was Berkeley, it technically hadn't been legalized yet, so I'm thinking we need to go apologize and talk our way out of trouble. But then I noticed this woman is visibly shaking. She was very clearly terrified and said, "I just don't know what to do. I'm having a situation with my daughter, and I really just need another adult to be there. My roommate Sean and I immediately agreed to go with her, while my other roommates look on, incredibly confused by whatever the heck is going on. The mother is asking some stoned students to be adults, so she must be truly desperate for help. Sean and I walk over there with her, and she explains that her daughter has some issues, which are currently manifesting as her standing on the roof of their house, threatening to drop her mom's work computer off the edge. Wow, shit just got real super fast. Sure enough, we walk up the driveway to the house, and there's this kid standing on the roof of their 2-story house, dangling a MacBook Pro over the side. She's saying in this disturbing, singy-songy voice, "Look, Mom, no hands." Sean and I immediately make eye contact, and we are both creeped out. This is not a normal kid. The way she is speaking reminds me of the twins from The Shining. She is not crying and doesn't seem remotely distressed. On the contrary, it appears that she is enjoying this torment on her mother, like it's some kind of sick game. The mom starts explaining to us that her daughter has had issues like this for many years. She has a psychiatrist and a therapist, and the mother has called both. They recommended calling the police, but the mom has been through this quite a few times before and doesn't want the child to go through the ordeal of being restrained and taken to the hospital again. She is frightened and exhausted and doesn't know what to do, so I just start talking to the kid. I tell her about how I used to love climbing on the roof of my house, and now I'm into rock climbing, and I bet she would love that too. Besides, it's much safer than climbing around the edge of a roof if you make sure to use the proper gear and safety precautions. And the fact that she's so unsafe right now is really scaring her mom. I told her if she calms down, I'm happy to talk to her more about climbing, as well as show her the pet geckos we have that literally climb up the walls. I'm just pulling things out of my ass at this point. I have no idea what to say or how to mediate a situation like this. But I'm just trying to diffuse the tension and get her to calm down. She's flat out ignoring me at first, continuing to taunt her mom, but eventually she seems to get bored or irritated with my attempts to engage her, turns around and climbs back towards the window where she got onto the roof. She runs down the stairs out to meet us, then says in some weirdly singy-songy fake, "Come play with us, Danny" voice, "I dropped your computer on the roof and now it's broken." "I'm sorry, Mom. Do you forgive me?" There was zero remorse whatsoever in her voice. It sounded so disturbing and manipulative. I was blown away that it was coming from a 10-year-old girl and not some demon child from a horror movie. The mom is still shaking and just looks overwhelmed, so I offer to go up and get her computer from the roof. She agrees and escorts me through the house up the stairs with her daughter trailing behind. It appears to be a perfectly normal, well-maintained middle-class home. The girl is clearly irritated with me spoiling her game and repeatedly orders me to leave. I ignore her, climb out the window onto the roof, and see the laptop is sitting by a gutter seemingly unscathed. I climb back through and hand it to the mom. At this point, the girl realized her bluff was called and skipped off to her room. Mom proceeds to explain to me that this whole thing was triggered by her changing the password to her laptop after the girl logged into it, stole her mom's credit card, and ordered over $2,000 worth of stuff. This girl is freaking 10 years old. She's been pulling stuff like this her entire life, I guess, and nobody understands why. They had to move the girl's younger sibling into a separate apartment with her father because they were afraid that she would hurt him. The mom was crying at this point, saying they really tried their best to get her the help she needs, and they're just at their wits' end, and I did my best to reassure her. Gave her my phone number and told her to contact me if she needs help in the future. Sean and I noped the heck out of there after that and went back to our house. She never contacted me, and we moved out a few months later. This happened a few months ago. I, 23 male, was driving home from a trip to the store while talking to my friend on the phone around 9 or 10 p.m. I pull into my driveway, park, and talk to my friend for a few minutes while I'm sitting there in my car. All of a sudden, this sketchy car pulls up directly behind me. There's no way I could back out without hitting the passenger side of it. It's dark, my driveway lights are kind of dim, and they deliberately turned off the lights of their car when they pulled up behind me. But I faintly spotted 3 guys sitting in it. I'm feeling pretty creeped out, so I asked my friend what I should do, and we both decided I should wait it out a bit and see if they leave. A few more minutes go by and they're still there. Eventually, we figured that the best plan of action would be to stay on the phone, calmly grab my bags from the trunk without breaking eye contact with the people in the car, and walk to the door, which is only about 15 feet away. In hindsight, it probably would have been a better idea to just call my parents and ask them to open the door for me from the inside. I stepped outside, then grabbed my stuff from the trunk. The guy in the rear passenger seat of their car cracks the door open, and the guy in the front passenger seat is staring me down still. They are definitely assessing if I'm a viable target, I'm thinking. I kept eye contact with them, but I felt like a deer in the headlights. It felt like ages, but it must have been 2 to 3 seconds at most. Suddenly, the guy in the rear shouts something to his buddies along the lines of, "Oh, it's a guy." Shuts the door, and then they speed away at like 80 miles per hour on a residential street. I was relieved, but mostly confused. I updated my friend and let them know I'm alright, then I walked inside. I'm male, 5'9", and slightly overweight with a bit of a baby face, so I don't exactly come across as intimidating to most people I meet. So, I doubt I scared them off because of my appearance alone. I'm terrified to think of what could have happened to me if I were a female. It's legitimately messed up. Why am I safe from these things while my sister and my female friends have no choice but to keep guns in their cars, get tiny cans of pepper spray for their keychains, and avoid being alone in general? It's a scary place out there. Whether you're male or female or anything else, always be vigilant. I used to think my neighborhood was relatively safe, but now I'm afraid of sitting in my driveway at night. When I was 15, my best friend at the time invited me along to check out our youth club. It wasn't like a church youth group or anything, although it did kind of have a religious message to it, but mostly it was a group of teens from all walks of life. Mostly kids from rough backgrounds, being able to get together and have some fun for a few hours one night a week, interacting with other kids and just forgetting about life for a bit. My best friend really enjoyed it, and each Friday morning at school I would be subjected to her praises of the group the night before and all the cool things they did. So one Thursday after school, I went along with her, and she was right. It was fun. There were 3 leaders, and they were all people in their 20s and early 30s. We played games and did a lot of group activities, but there was also a place to do schoolwork or get extra help if needed. I went along with her the next week as well, and I remember being really flattered and feeling really special when one of the leaders singled me out and praised me. He ended up giving me special attention most weeks when I did actually go. I didn't go every week, but I was pretty much a regular. There were a few times when I won a game of some sort, and he told me to hang around afterwards and wait for him, and he would get me a prize. I'd follow him into one of the back rooms, and he'd give me a chocolate bar as my prize. I realize now that anything could have happened in that back room at the center, because it was mostly a disused room, so nobody would have thought to look for me there. But it was also poorly lit. He could have done anything to me, but he didn't. I didn't have a male figure in my life, and my mom and I weren't the best of friends when I was a teenager, so I really looked up to this guy and just thought he was cool. He wasn't an authority figure like all the other adults, so I really felt special when he gave me attention. There was one time my friends and I were walking home from school and we were smoking. He drove past, and then when he saw it was us, he turned back around. We thought we were in so much trouble, but he said that it was better that he knew. He even told us that he smoked himself and then offered to ride us home. My friend lived not that far away, so she was home before me. For 10 minutes, it was just me and him, and again, now that I think about it, anything could have happened, but it didn't. He asked me about my favorite bands and music, movies, and TV shows. We had a fun time. When we pulled up near my house, he put his hand on my knee and squeezed it, telling me that he'd hoped to see me at that group that Thursday. I didn't think anything of it at all. It didn't seem out of the ordinary to me. There were gifts, too. He gave me a USB once with about 100 movies downloaded onto it. Gave me a poster for my room of a band I liked. He even one day after the group ended, gave me some cigarettes from his pack. The light touches continued. He'd walk past me and pull my ponytail, or he'd playfully slap my arm. There were compliments about my hair or what I was wearing. Again, in my mind, there was nothing weird going on at all. I thought it was normal, and I felt special and flattered. One day, he found me on social media and sent me messages through Facebook. He started out nice and then got weird. I was 16 by this stage, and I was just starting to have proper crushes and notice boys. He asked if there were any boys I liked, or if I knew of any at my school that liked me. He asked if I'd ever been kissed, and I'll never forget that afternoon because I was cleaning my room, and my phone pinged with a message. It was from him. He asked me if I'd ever touched myself or had dirty thoughts. I was so embarrassed that I quickly put my phone back and didn't message him for 2 days after. He apologized profusely and told me not to tell anyone, but my mom happened to see over my shoulder, and she asked who all the messages were from. I asked her a question about what he had asked me, thinking it was normal for boys to ask that question, not seeing anything wrong, despite the fact that I had been embarrassed by it, and she flipped. I didn't understand at all what was going on, and she demanded to see the phone and the messages. She wanted to know everything. There was no youth group after that, and I never saw him again. At the time, I didn't understand the situation or what was going on. Mom and I have never spoken about it properly, but I can only assume she notified somebody about it. A week later at school, I was taken out of class, and some people asked me some questions about the youth leader, and I told them all. I don't know what happened to him, and I don't know if he'd done it before or if he did it again. Sometimes I wonder if he was trying to groom me. It was definitely creepy, and I understand the scope of the situation now, that it's nearly 10 years on. So this event just happened to me about 30 minutes ago, and I'm still creeped out by it. I'm writing this story out on a different public bus as we speak, so I apologize if this story seems a little bit rushed. I live in a specific city in the northeast of Scotland, and as a result, I rely heavily on public buses to get to and from my local university. I have come across a few different weirdos in my short time here in the city, but this is certainly the most bizarre out of them all. I'm currently an art student, and today I was meant to be working on a specific project for this semester. I soon realized I forgot the camera I so desperately needed. I wasn't technically meant to be in class until the afternoon, so I made the decision to jump on the next bus I saw, heading back to my flat. Who knew this would end up being a mistake? The bus journey started off like any other. People got on, people got off. People are generally avoiding all conversations. Nothing unusual in the slightest. As for myself, I was absent-mindedly looking out the window as I usually do, just casually watching the world go by when the elderly lady in question decided to take the seat next to me. At first glance, she looked completely harmless. She was an elderly lady after all. I say she was maybe 70 years old, Middle Eastern in origin, sporting a thick white jacket and dark-tinted sunglasses. Completely harmless, if not a little bit weird. And you'll see why in a minute. At first, I assumed she wanted to engage in small talk with me, asking me about the bus's destination and the economy, now that Brexit is a thing. I don't particularly enjoy small talk, but I would never be rude towards anyone who wanted to exchange conversation with me. I like to think I am pretty respectful overall. She then started to ask me about me as the conversation shifted towards me. She asked all the standard questions like, are you from around here, or what are you up to today? Do you go to university? When's your stop? All of which I politely answered. I saw no harm in doing so. I have way too much respect for the elderly in that way. She then started quizzing me about my family, whether or not I have a grandmother, and of course, whether I have a boyfriend. Oh, how that last question annoys me. I identify as lesbian, and I do understand some people aren't comfortable with me outright saying I have a girlfriend, so I always referred to her as my partner. It's just much easier to say it that way, I believe. So then she asked me if my partner was a man or a woman, and it was then I told her the truth. If people tend to ask me that, then I'm sure it's safe to assume that it's okay to reveal the gender of my loved one. That's when it got really weird damn quickly. She then followed up on this inquiry with these questions, all of which made me feel really weird. Why did you choose to be with a woman? Why did you not like being with a man? Do you hate men? Have you ever been with a man? Is it better with a woman? What do you and your girlfriend do? Then she started getting very specific, saying things like, are you on top or bottom, or do you penetrate each other? Or is it just oral? At this point, I was beyond uncomfortable. You can't just ask a complete stranger about this, especially in such gross detail and on public transportation. This is way beyond weird. I politely told her that this conversation was inappropriate and I didn't feel okay talking about this with her, but she persisted. I said nothing until I got off the next available stop. She then got off at the same exact stop as me to begin following me through the busy streets of the city. Thankfully, I managed to lose her in the crowd by entering one of the many shopping malls, making sure to lose her. Once I was sure I lost her, I boarded the next bus and managed to get to my flat safely. This is certainly one of the most bizarre encounters I've ever experienced. If anybody can give me an explanation as to why she was asking me all these weird questions, then feel free to share, but I'm still very creeped out by this. I won't be boarding that bus again anytime soon, I can promise you that. When I, 25 female, was newly 16 in 2011, I went to China on a 10-day trip for high school students sponsored by our local Midwestern university. On one occasion, we were in a large market on the basement level of a shopping center in Beijing. I can't remember exactly where. We were supposed to be using the buddy system, and I was buddies with a boy that I have stayed friends with over the years. While looking around the large market, we got separated for a few minutes, visiting different stalls, but I just assumed my friend was close by and could see me. I walked into a shop stall by myself to look at some of those tacky souvenir canvas bags that you can find in any major city. I browsed for a couple of hours, not paying attention to the fact that I was the only one in the stall, when a small middle-aged Chinese woman came up to me and grabbed me tightly around the arm. In broken English, she told me that she had more purses and bags in her secret shop and started pulling me towards the back of the store. Taken aback, I said I didn't want to look. In front of me, a man was pushing open a door at the back of a wall that had bags hanging all over that would have appeared to be part of the display. I just remember being incredibly confused and hesitant. She was holding onto my arm so tight it hurt while pulling me forward, and I just remember in that moment looking around quickly. Then I see my 6'2" tall male friend running over. He came and grabbed my other arm, and when she saw him, she immediately let go, walked off, and the man shut the door. I don't know exactly what was going on, but I do know that I was very young and naive at the time, and that I am very fortunate I had a watchful friend. When I was 20, I spent a semester abroad in Copenhagen. I lived in a house in the suburb just north of the city, and I had spent the evening having some drinks with friends in the city center. I was the only friend who lived in that direction, so I got on the S train by myself. I did this every day to get to and from class to go home. A male friend offered to go with me, but I didn't want to inconvenience him with an extra trip, so I declined. The train ride was 20 to 30 minutes, and the second stop, a dark-haired middle-aged man, sat down across from me. Even though I had been drinking, I wasn't drunk, and by this point in my life, I had learned how to be just a little bit more careful of my surroundings. I busied myself with my phone, and he asked me how I was in Danish. Many people assumed I was because I am pale and blonde. My barely passable Danish was even worse if I had any alcohol, so I apologized and said that I only spoke English. In choppy English, he said he was Spanish and didn't speak much English himself. I just smiled and nodded, hoping he would understand that we couldn't talk. However, he kept trying to ask me questions though, and I decided to be polite and asked how he was doing in my incredibly poor Spanish. He took that as an invitation to ask more questions, and I could barely understand a thing. He was visibly frustrated I couldn't converse with him, and then tried to ask if I was with friends or if I was from here. Subtle red flags. I thought about getting off the train early, but I didn't want to get lost. I had only been there a few weeks at this point. 10 minutes later, I got to my stop and got off the train. I very much noticed he also got off the train just before the door closed. Usually I walked home. It was a 15-minute walk from the station to my house, and on normal days, it was a pleasant walk through a residential neighborhood. He followed me through the tunnel under the tracks to the other side, and luckily a city bus was outside the station. I immediately got on, showed the driver my pass, and sat right behind him. It was late at night, and I was the only one on the bus. This driver must have been perceptive and understood something was amiss because he looked at me and asked in English, not Danish, where my stop was. I told him, and he closed the door right after. As the bus pulled away, I saw the Spanish man standing outside the station, staring at me through the windows. He turned away and walked back through the tunnel under the station towards the platform. Both experiences were a combination of good timing and understanding people, but it is frustrating to think that I needed or should have had the help of a male friend in these scenarios. The world isn't always a friendly place. One night around 11 p.m., my mom and I were sitting in the room. My dad and sister were in bed, and my mom was asleep on the couch and I was playing PUBG Mobile. At one point, I could hear noises coming from the hallway. Thinking it was the cats, I brushed it off. I started to hear more noise and thought, what the heck are they doing? Then I saw something roll on the floor by the dining room table and one of the cats walking up to it. Again, thinking it was the cats. The object, however, was placed on top of a vanity that we have in the hallway. They don't go on top of that, but we do have a 9 to 10 month old curious kid. I then heard a male voice. At first I thought it might be one of my teammates in the game talking. I quickly realized it was not. I then thought my dad got up, which is pretty common for him. So I asked my mom. Didn't realize she was falling asleep. If my dad had come down, it was him. She sleepily said yes, so I tried to brush it off again. Suddenly I see this thing, which I found out after was cleaning wipes for the interior of the cars that were placed on the vanity, flying at me, landing on the floor, on the stool in front of me. I don't remember, I thought. That can't be the cats. I got up and walked over to the hallway. I got to the step when I realized that my dad's walking stick and a straw hat that was on top of our coat hanger were on the floor. Neither cat has ever got on top of it. I walked up the step and heard movement in the office. It was dark. The office is right next to the front door, about 2 meters from the living room front door. I thought it might be my sister looking for something. And then this guy gets up, comes out of the room, goes to the front door, unlocks it, and walks out. He was wearing a hoodie and I didn't see his face. I was paralyzed with fear and confusion. My mind immediately went, do I know him? After he left, I yelled out to my mom that somebody just walked out. She was obviously confused and concerned. We realized he came in from the back door, which was unlocked. He either climbed the gate, which is about 2 meters high, I think, walked up the neighbor's stairs, and then over the wall. You can see the back door from the street. The only things he took were the back door keys and a Bluetooth player, we believe, which we don't really care much about. We made a barricade that would make noise if he came back and sat with knives and a big 2-pronged fork until about 5 a.m. We had another lock, so Dad changed it the next day. I slept with the knife under my bed that night. Looking back, I wish I had done something. I played rugby for 2 years. I know the basics to tackle, but I couldn't move. Obviously because of fear, but my brain was also trying to understand what was going on. I probably could have taken him on. He was very thin and looked between 17 and 19. 20 at most, judging by his style and body. We think that we might know who did it, but they didn't technically break in. They only took 2 things. Walked past all of our valuables, and he didn't do anything to us. It almost looked like he was trying to get my attention as well. Almost as if it were a bet and he tried to find a reason to get out. Either that or he's the worst robber I've ever heard of. I'm just happy my sister wasn't bad. It probably would have been a different story if she had been there with us. A lot of people think they know how they would react in certain situations. I am living proof you don't. I thought I'd scream at least, but nothing. We now lock our doors every night. Every time I hear a noise, I get a little bit frightened, but I'm okay. If he wanted to hurt me, he would have tried. We got lucky. This just happened an hour ago, and I still can't shake the feeling. This evening, I needed to run to the grocery store with my husband and 2 of our kids. We all wore our masks and tried to make the trip as quick as possible. As we were leaving one area on one end of the store, an older gentleman, maybe in his mid-70s, was passing us. My daughter, who was only 7, had to let go of my hand to get on one side while I waited with the cart. He bent down and crowded her space so much that she was hunched against an end cap. He asked if she wanted to switch masks because hers was prettier than his. I immediately startled, feeling tingly all over, and my stomach started to knot. I quickly moved around to grab her hand, did the nervous laughing it off, and we started walking to the other end of the store. I still had this feeling, so when we got to the last aisle, I looked back. He was still standing there in the way, staring at her. He quickly looked away when he saw me watching him. I grabbed her hand tighter, filled my husband in, and we both became hyper aware of our surroundings. When going to check out, he was there, so we went to another aisle until he was out of the store. My husband knew one of the workers, and when we told him, he said the man was irregular and harmless. Maybe so, but that sick feeling was there for a reason. We paid for our things and scanned the parking lot when leaving. I hate that this is the world we live in. It may have always been this way, but I feel like everybody is more aware of it now. I'm well aware of the pandemic, by the way. I'm well aware that a family trip to the store may seem stupid. With my job, I have to be careful. I take all the precautions for my family and my kids. My kids 11, 10, and 7 have been stuck indoors for the better part of 3 months when their school got shut down. They only recently started going back part-time. 2 of the 3 have ADHD. That's not the most difficult thing for a child to have it, but it does suck so bad most of the time. But if they can get 5 minutes of normalcy in a small town, store during non-busy hours, then we mask up, wash hands, sanitize cars, and we go in. It gives them some much needed change and calms them down a bit, and it allows me to have a calm evening and get some sleep. I'm not sure if this even qualifies as creepy since it might just be a weird joke, but here goes nothing. My boyfriend and I went to a restaurant about 3 weeks ago, and the couple, let's call them Anna and Jack, that was sitting at the table behind us had some trouble with their credit card while paying for their drinks. We assumed they were tourists because they were speaking English, not a language often spoken in my country, and the elderly waiter didn't understand anything they were saying. So I turned around and asked them what was going on in order to help them out. For some reason, the guy's credit card was declined and they only had euros, which are still not an official currency here, so they couldn't pay with cash, and they were trying to ask the waiter where the nearest ATM was so that they could get some money and pay for their drinks. I then explained to the guy where he can find the ATM and told the waiter the guy would be right back and would take care of the bill. Since his girlfriend stayed in the restaurant and sat there waiting for him, I made a joke about how people over 50 can't speak a word of English in my country. And we started talking, so we invited her to sit with us because you could tell she was really uncomfortable just sitting there all by herself, waiting for her boyfriend to get back. Anyways, about 10 minutes later, her boyfriend came back, paid for the drinks, and they invited us to get a beer with them because we helped them with the waiter and all. So my boyfriend and I agreed, and we went to a nearby bar. We started talking, and it turned out they had just moved here 2 days ago. Not going to say from which country, but let's just say Scandinavia. And they moved into a house just 2 blocks away from our apartment. We started talking about random stuff, and Jack said they just watched the movie It that afternoon. That it's their favorite movie or something. And I mentioned that I was dead afraid of clowns and I get really uncomfortable even talking about them. We each had 2 beers and they both seemed pretty cool, so we told them we were having a couple of friends over on Saturday to play some board games and invited them to come since they didn't know anybody in the city. They said that sounded cool and we exchanged phone numbers. So here comes Saturday and our friends come to our place and we're waiting for Jack and Anna to come over. And Anna texts me that they're outside and they have a little surprise for me. I buzz them in and they come up. They ring the doorbell and my boyfriend lets them in. And I go on the hallway and they're both putting on Pennywise masks and waving at me while laughing. I got so creeped out that I started screaming. What the heck is wrong with you guys? And they just continued to laugh for like 10 seconds and then took off their masks and told me to relax and that it was only a joke. It was a very weird and awkward night after that. And they took off about an hour later because they had to take their dogs out for a walk or something. And to be honest, everybody felt relieved they went home so soon because they both came off as very rude and wouldn't even talk to our friends the whole night. She texted me around midnight saying she was sorry, and as soon as I texted her back saying it's not a big deal and everything is fine, even though that wasn't really true, she sent me a gif of a sad clown with sorry written under the pic. I don't know what the heck is wrong with both of them and why they thought messing with me like that is funny. What makes me more angry is the fact they were both so nice and seemed like a great couple to hang out with the day we met them, but turned out to be rude and weird. Both I and my boyfriend blocked their numbers, and we hope we don't run into them anytime soon. This did not dawn on me until I had my own children and have hence been vigilant with stranger danger. Suddenly, one day, I sat up and realized the actual danger I was in and how close I came to who knows what. I was about 10 and staying with my grandma, something I did and loved for a week every holiday. My grandma lived in a new suburb on the outskirts of our city. Because it was new, there were a lot of new immigrants who started to move in there. There was a wave of immigration from Lebanon due to the war there, asylum seekers. This was a very white Australia, so my 10-year-old mind found these people bizarre with their different clothes, etc. Anyway, I was sort of playing by myself and sort of playing with the new kids in this church parking lot, down the road from my grandma's. I was the only blonde Anglo out of about 20 kids of all ages, 2 to 12 years old. I think that's why I may have been singled out, because I stood out. So this little girl about my age was sort of trying to play with me. She was so foreign to me with her hijab and long black dress, in a 40-degree Aussie summer. I blurted out to her, "Why are you wearing such an ugly dress?" Because I was raised by very compassionate parents, my shame rose up in me immediately. But no more than when I looked around to see if anybody heard me, and there stood a man just staring at me. I thought at the time he heard me. I was so ashamed and thought he might come over and speak to me about my mean girl comment or tell my grandma, or worse, ring my parents. I was 10 and all adults had a line to each other, lol. I now realize he wasn't even close enough to hear me, but my 10-year-old head at the time thought him watch me from 10 meters away, sort of behind a tree, over 2 to 3 hours was because he was deciding how to punish me for my crime. Anyway, it started to get dark. Everybody started to disperse for bath, dinner, and bed. I got up and started to walk back. The man started to follow me. He followed me to my grandma's. I ran inside and shut and locked the door. I was waiting for his knocks to tell my grandma my crime, but instead nothing came. Phew, he must have changed his mind. But as I took a sneak peek out of the window, I saw him go down the side of the house. Oh no, he's going in the back to tell her. Shame. But nothing. Oh, thank you. Just as I was going to bed, I looked out my back window and there he was, smoking something, standing under the clothesline, still weighing up whether to tell my grandma. I kept taking sneak peeks and he was still there till I fell asleep. The next day, my grandma said my bedroom fly screen and my bathroom flash screen were off their windows. that I must have done it because they couldn't just fall off. She also said I was not to try and force my window open if it sticks next time, because all the wood around the window was all chipped and broken. I said no, I didn't do it, but she didn't believe me. Not a crotchety grandma, she let it go. And do you know I never ever connected that it must have been that man trying to get in? Because it was my window and my bathroom window. In my head, he was there to speak to Grandma, so there was no connection. I never thought of him again until just last week. I'm an aware adult now, and have just realized how close I came to who knows what. Edit. My grandma was very security conscious, so all windows and doors were always latched shut at night, regardless of the weather. The windows were those old-fashioned push-in casement windows, so the fly screens were all on the outside, which in turn were nailed into the window, so they had to be pried off. So he went to a lot of effort to get them off and would have had to use a tool like a chisel or knife. Probably used the same tool to try and open the window, hence the broken wood. Not my story, but my dad's. Around 40 years ago, when my dad was still in college, he moved quite a ways from Vietnam to New Haven, Connecticut for college. He wanted to be as near as possible to his college, but also wanted to overlook the city skyline. He had already received the Form I-20 and went to the counselor at the U.S. Embassy to try and get an M student visa. He was a first-generation immigrant, and though he had taken a fair amount of English classes in Vietnam, he wasn't fluent and knew nothing about housing in America. This is why he went the cheap route and ended up renting out a sketchy place. Some sketchy apartment somewhere near Pine Tree Drive in West Haven. His landlord, as he told me later, gave off some serious red flags that he sort of brushed off because the apartment was only $250 a month. Firstly, the landlord's abode was directly next door to that of my dad's, and during his first night there, while he was getting unpacked, he heard a high-pitched screeching and weird opera music. Again, he brushed it off for the same reason as said above, and also because he was very tired. The next morning when he awoke, he noticed a chair by his bed that wasn't there before, and when he went to the bathroom, his toilet seat was up, though he recalled putting it down. Not only that, but his door was unlocked. He brushed it off again because he didn't want to stir anything up with his landlord by asking if he had come into his room or by asking if it had been broken into, therein implying that the apartment was insecure. He also wanted to explore West Haven as his college year did not begin until late August. He had come 3 weeks early as he left. He specifically remembered locking his door behind him, but when he returned after a few hours out, he noticed that not only had the door been unlocked, but it was slightly ajar. This went on for weeks until his college year began. Things slightly moved from where he had left them. Articles of food were missing from his fridge and other weird happenings occurred. Finally, my dad had had enough. One night, he decided to stay awake until very late and try to catch whoever was doing this red-handed. That night, he finished his homework and then got into bed, but he remained awake. And sure enough, at around 2 in the morning, he sees his door handle turning and a hand sliding through. My dad froze, with his blood running cold. He saw the landlord creep in and take some eggs from the fridge. Not only that, but the landlord then went to the bathroom, coming out a couple of minutes afterwards, and then he slipped out once again, leaving the door unlocked. This creeped my dad out like hell, which is understandable, but for some stupid reason, he still decided to stay at the apartment for a few more nights before he finally confronted the landlord. Money and wanting to save it does some stupid things to the brain, I guess. This was before mobile phones and even decent cameras that didn't cost more than $100, and so my dad had literally no way to get evidence to show the police, besides mere accusations. The next night, he once more heard the odd screeching and weird opera music coming from his landlord's room, and he decided to take matters into his own hands. That weekend, when his landlord went out shopping, he broke into his landlord's room, and what he found there was seriously disturbing. First of all, he found some weird sex doll, but when he investigated further, he found an old Kodak camera. Under this were some extremely low-quality pictures of him in bed sleeping. He noped the heck out of there, obviously, taking the pictures with him and went to the police station. He moved out there shortly, and he later heard that this same landlord had scared other residents of the apartment off after hearing the odd screeching and opera music, and after seeing all of their things moved around. The building my dad lived in was since torn down, and my dad decided to just dorm at Sigma Chi. He had at first opted to stay away from fraternities because of the heavy partying. We never knew what happened to the landlord, only that he would be facing some prison time. I seriously hope he was never allowed to be a landlord again, though. This happened 2 hours ago, which in my time zone is approximately 1:15 a.m. I'm from Texas, born and raised, along with everybody else in my family. During the summer, a huge activity for every Texan, as well as non-Texans, is to go tubing down rivers. Unfortunately, due to work schedules, our friend group could never settle on a day in time to go tubing, especially considering that we lived about an hour away. Then we realized that we could just go at night after everyone is off work, which is completely legal, by the way. Several times this summer, we have floated the river without a hitch. We mostly worry about snakes. However, due to the cold water and cooler temperatures, they are not too much of a worry. But what happened tonight was much, much worse. My cousin just turned 21. To celebrate, we gathered up some of our friend group who could make it, which happened to be 6 males and 2 females. My cousin and I were the females. We floated it once through and decided that we wanted to go a second time, which I was opposed to, but I was definitely outnumbered. I had a funny feeling but brushed it off as being tired and cold. We skipped the beginning part of the river to be closer to the exit. However, that also meant we were closer to the darkest part of the river, but we had just floated it 20 minutes prior, so it should be fine, right? As we were floating into the darkness, we started to hear voices and finally see 2 males standing on the bank. One was heavier set, the other was skin and bones. They yelled, "Hey, do y'all want some marijuana?" We immediately told them no and proceeded to float by. I was at the back of the group with 2 males next to me. One was holding my hand, the other my tube. As my foot neared the bank, the heavier man reached out and grabbed a hold of my foot, jumping in after us, attempting to pull me out of the tub. The skinnier one jumped in after and lashed onto my tub in an attempt to separate me from the group. I was frozen and I couldn't move. Couldn't think. I couldn't hear. I just knew I couldn't let my friend's hands go. They started harassing me, talking about my tits and how one of them had his hands full with his girlfriend, but the other was quote-unquote available. After a couple of seconds, they realized I wasn't letting go, so they backed off. When they backed off, a woman, out of nowhere, jumped into the middle of our group. She lashed onto tubes, then yelled, "I got some fishies," and began to make a cooing noise into the trees above us, asking everyone personal questions such as where we're from, how long we're staying, our names and ages, and finally asking for one of the guys' hats. Then she yelled, again, "I got some fishies," and began to make a cooing noise into the trees above us. We finally told her no, we needed to leave, and she said, "I don't have COVID, but I have corona," and proceeded to spit on one of the members in our group. Repeatedly as we floated on, separating ourselves from them while trying to remain calm, waiting to reach the exit, we heard them talking. More than just 3 of them. We made a dash to the nearest exit and ran to our cars. When we all realized we were safe, we began thinking and asking ourselves questions. How many people were out there up in the trees, hiding in the bushes, lying down on the bank above us? Had they followed us? Had they watched and waited for us to get in the darkest part of the river? We called the local authorities to report the incident. I don't know if this is the right place to post this, but I just had a flashback memory and would like your thoughts on the situation. When I, 15 female, became best friends with this girl who we'll call Allie. We ended up becoming more than friends, but our relationship was sweet and pretty innocent. Her family was middle class and Christian and lived in a suburban neighborhood. She got along with her parents, but the whole family dynamic was just a bit odd to me. She had one slightly older sister. Her parents were older than most in our friend group, like approaching 60, and her dad used to be a pastor or something. Some very religious career, and had a lot to say about the Bible and such, which is why we were afraid to tell him we were in a gay relationship and just acted like besties. I remember early on Ellie telling me how they got kicked out of the church because of some very insane lies and rumors about them having some sort of sex ring in their house, and that CPS was called and is still an issue. I was confused, but it made her angry to talk about, so I didn't press on it. She seemed to believe none of it was based in reality, and that was the first weird thing. They didn't allow her to have her door closed, especially when she had friends over, but the house was empty most of the time. One day we were changing into swimsuits or something and turned away from each other. I was facing a mirror and I saw her dad peeking through the open door at us. We were both naked. I froze and pretended I didn't see him and hoped he'd go away. Then he was gone and never said anything. At the time, I thought it must have been an accident somehow, like he was just checking on us and didn't mean to see us naked. I don't know. Then Allie would tell me about these strange women who would come over and disappear into her parents' room for hours. Once her dad came back out to the kitchen, covered in sweat with a camera around his neck. Once he came into the room after Allie and I had a sleepover and she had gotten up to get ready for whatever. Sat with me on the bed and basically said that being gay is okay because I can't get his daughter pregnant and that it's a sin, but all sins are the same and that I might as well, because we're all forgiven in the end, so nothing matters. I thought that was incredibly jarring at the time. I didn't know how he knew because we were only affectionate in private and even pretended to like boys. Never talked about it again. We broke up at age 17. There must have been more little weird things, but those are the main ones I remember. I don't know what I'm looking for posting this here, I guess. I'm just still confused about all of it. Edit. Another thing I just remembered is that they would have movies playing in the family room that my parents would have never played, like really intense sex scenes and such, and even when we were all eating dinner. I remember wanting to crawl out of my skin, but they acted like it was a normal movie scene. It blew my mind. In October 2020, I was working in a department store at guest services, and a woman came in with school supplies to return. She looked to be in her 40s and wore a scarf that covered her face and head in compliance with the mask order. She said the school supplies were a gift to the school, but she couldn't use them, so she was returning them. I had trouble finding the items in our system, and unfortunately for me, this gave her plenty of time to talk. At first, she was just texting with somebody using speech to text. Somebody who seemed to be checking up on her, asking where she was, what she was doing, and what she was thinking about God. She replied, "I'm at the store. I've been learning to ask God for things the way I would ask a husband." It gave me bad vibes, but I reminded myself it wasn't my business. Then the woman started talking to me again. She seemed dazed. Her speech was slow and odd, as if she didn't quite remember how to string words together, but not slurred or drunken. She went on for a while about how she suffered financial losses during the pandemic, but found a new church and having faith was everything to her now. Really, it is a blessing. Being deprived of things, even food. That's how you find God. She started getting a bit pushy, forcing a connection like she wanted to convert me, but I tried to be polite and ignore my hang-ups. A lot of customers needed emotional support at that time, and it wasn't the first conversation I'd had that was a little too personal for me. I said things like, "It's a dark time for you right now. It's important to have something to help you get through." All the time thinking, who is checking up on her? Did somebody deliberately deprive her of food? Is that why she's out of it, or is she in a cult? She kept staring at me the whole time I wrestled with the return and eventually noticed my scars. "My daughter has the same problem as you," she said out of the blue. So I told her that it's the devil making her do that. I didn't know what to say at that point, so I just kept updating her on the return. Then she started to read my name off my name tag over and over. Jesse, Jesse, Jesse. Slowly and strangely. It made me wish I hadn't worn my name tag that day. I didn't like her knowing my name. I didn't want her to know anything about me, really. I finished the return as quickly as I could and pushed the items I couldn't return back at her. "Sorry, but they're no longer in our system. I hope you can find a use for them." "Thank you." "And Jesse?" "Yes?" "Here's my face." She pulled down the green scarf and flashed a huge grin at me. "Okay," I said blankly, and she finally left. I signed out of the register and went to take 5 in the back room. I've had some bad interactions at work before, but this is by far the creepiest. I still wonder about this woman and her daughter. Did I meet a cult member? Was cult abuse leading her daughter to insanity, or was I just jumping to conclusions based on my own bad experiences and too much true crime? I hope they got away from any bad influences in their lives and are doing better, but also I hope this woman stays away from me. Hello there. A friend of mine suggested I tell this story after I told him it. I'll try to keep it short. My father died in 2009 after a heart attack, ironically while helping build a table in a church. I had recently turned 18 when it happened and was thrust in the unpleasant process of funeral arrangements. With the help from my family, we were able to set up a funeral at that very same church because life is ironic a lot. At that funeral, I was with my family greeting people at the door and showing them in. I was sullen, broken, and angry with the world at large as I shook each person's hand and offered them some token thanks for coming. I knew all the faces that came by, if some only distantly, until this woman came through the line with a very large wrapped package in her arms. Funerals, at least as I know them, aren't usually the time for gifts, so she immediately caught my attention. She was about 5'6" with long black curly hair and seemed to be in her late 50s, which would fit her knowing my father. She came up and shook my hand rather enthusiastically considering the setting and said, "Hi, I'm Monica. I know your dad very well, and he would want you to have this." As she pushed the package into my arms, I immediately felt it and knew it was a book. A big one. Not big as in thick, but long and wide in the cover, about 2 feet by 1 feet, respectively. This being not the time for it, I set it aside and continued the funeral, but not before she gave me a big hug out of nowhere. I assumed that Monica attended the funeral and left afterwards, but I never saw her leave. In fact, neither I nor any of my family had ever heard of her. I asked the people who helped me put it all together, and they had no idea who she was at all. No call logs, no social media messages, literally nothing. In fact, we kept my father's death specifically off of social media because even at the time I saw Facebook for being the incredibly terrible place that it had been proven to be. Nobody had heard of her, to the point that I thought she might be crashing random people's funerals. But she knew my father, supposedly. I know this because inside the book she gave me is a handwritten inscription that is a bit too personable for me to share verbatim, but it was definitely referring to my father by name. Lastly, that inscription was written as though it was a gift being given to my father and was dated at the end with the date of his birthday, in 1984, 25 years before the funeral. The funeral got done and sucked, as funerals do, and we started the process of going through all my dad's stuff. I eventually looked at the book we got, and it was called The Secret Teachings of All Ages, an encyclopedic outline of Masonic, Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and Rosicrucian symbolical philosophy by Manly P. Hall. As I started to look through it, what first caught my attention was how expensive the book looked and felt. Thick parchment, a well-made spine cover, and meticulously written from what I could understand at the time. I'd only made it through 2 pages before my head just felt numb. The book is huge, but the font on the inside is pretty small comparatively. Then there were the illustrations. Massive full-page pictures depicting some of the weirdest symbology I'd ever seen. Pictures of gods, rituals, expensive tables on elements in different worlds. There's a picture just about every 3rd page, even more strange than the last. All the pictures looked old. I'm not an art guy, but this looks like the way old paintings were done. All of the illustrations were printed into the book, not drawn there originally. I've read a small bit more now that I'm older and can understand the writing a lot better. It seems to be written in a way that it describes the philosophy and rituals of each of the named groups, as well as the history of those rituals and the connecting line throughout. It does not take a stance on the validity of the information. Additionally, the edition I have is the Golden Anniversary edition, and I have found that the original edition was published in 1925. All of this is 100% true. I'll share a few pictures, including one of the illustrations I picked randomly. I really don't know what to do with the book. It could be worth something to sell, but for some reason I find that idea gross. I've been toying with making a YouTube series where I break it down a few pages at a time, but I think I'll only get views from moronic anon people, and I don't want to feed that nonsense. I grew up around the world. My parents were divorced and they had joint custody, so every other year I lived with the other parent. Both their jobs required them to move every 1 to 3 years to a whole new country, so usually I'd only stay in one place for a year or 2. I moved to India in 1995 as a freshman. This was the largest school I'd ever been to. I was fat, pimply, and scared of the new school. I've always been good at making friends, but this school was harder. Most of them lived here their whole life, so it's hard to break into those circles of friends. But a large portion were similar to me, moving often, though not as frequent. And even they weren't so receptive to new kids either. Every fall we did something at the school called a mini course, or maybe a mini trip. Anyway, everybody in high school had to sign up for a 5-day field trip. There were tons. It was a pretty big school. Seniors got priority, of course. Some trips were like sailing the Ganges, or hiking some mountain, or riding trains to Arca. I can't remember except for the 2 I went on. In my freshman year, I went rafting the Ganges. It's exactly what it sounds like. 6 kids in a raft with an experienced rafter, and we went down different portions of the Ganges and camped in tents. There were 2 sophomores. We will call them RJ and Steve, though those are not their real names. They were the snotty rich kids, pompous and arrogant. They seemed to take a real liking to picking on me. I had been made fun of before, but this was rough. One morning, they tied my clothes together and threw them in the water and tied them to a branch. Stuff like that. The chaperone was kind of a jerk about it too. He asked me who did it, and I said, well, I can't prove it, what does it matter? And he said, that's what I want to hear. I mean, he heard and witnessed the harassment and never intervened. I was never one to tattle though. That's just not something I was raised to do. Anyways, it sucked because the rest of the year I didn't have any problems, but every time I saw these two, they always did or said something, just being general bullies. Slapping my lunch out of my hand or unzipping my bag so my books would fall out. Over the summer, I hit a growth spurt and I went on a diet. I shot up about 5 inches in 6 months and, with good food and exercise, I was looking pretty good. I even made the basketball team as a sophomore. The coach was the chaperone from the previous mini course, funny enough, and I had made some more friends. RJ and Steve were always into weed, but now I think they were into some other stuff too. They looked different the next year and acted majorly different. Meaner, generally irritable, and they still tried to pick on me, but when I used to walk away, I could feel like they thought they had won. Now I could tell walking away annoyed them and made them angrier. The mini course came around and the coach wanted me on cycling some mountains or a range, something like that. He thought it would be cool for my conditioning, so I went, and sure enough, RJ and Steve were on the trip as well. I had the room next to them at the hotel, and I smelled weed all the time. Then we'd go out and ride some portion of the hills, then back again, and they would be smoking. At dinners and stuff, they would make jokes about me. I kept ignoring them until one of the seniors berated them for being bullies. They loved it. They laughed, and really, I think they just liked the attention. Going up to my room, I saw them in the hallway, and they threatened me that if I told the chaperone they were smoking, that they would stab me. I said, I haven't told them yet. Why would I do it now? The next morning, I was told to hang back and pick up some stragglers. Since I was riding pretty well, usually it was some freshman or a less athletic kid in the back. This time it was RJ and Steve. I slowed down for them and told them that we only had 10 minutes to get to the top. Steve threw a stick at my wheel. Then they both sped off laughing. It didn't do anything, but they were laughing as they went around the corner and out of sight. Then I heard, "Oh crap," and "Stop." As I came around the corner, I saw them both falling off the mountain and into the trees. I slowed down and looked over the edge. I could see a branch poking through RJ's arm. He was looking up at me, then down, then up, very confused. I couldn't see Steve. For a reason not known to me today, I didn't do anything. I kept riding. I don't know why. I was raised to always do the right thing and help people, but at that moment, I felt like they deserved it. I know they didn't, but I thought they did for some reason. It was a real battle in my head. I got to the top of the mountain and the chaperone asked if everyone was up. I said, I think so, but I didn't see Steve or RJ. I don't know why I lied, but it was weird. It was so natural and I didn't even feel like I was saying it. The chaperone rode back down to the mountain to find them. The other chaperone guided us back on the route that we were going. When we got back to the hotel, they were loading RJ and Steve into a van. This was like 2 hours later, by the way. It wasn't an ambulance. I guess the van was faster. Anyways, they were bloodied and black in some spots. Steve's whole head was wrapped, and when he leant forward, blood would pour out of his nose like a faucet. Then the Indian guy would push his head back. I looked right at RJ and didn't say anything. He was on morphine or something and was completely out of it. There was so much blood on his shirt and pants. They both came back after Christmas break. RJ before Steve. RJ's arm was still in a cast and his foot was in a boot. Steve had this scar between his eyes where he fractured his skull. It was actually really bad. Something you definitely don't forget. His skull didn't look set right or something. Like it kind of shifted. It wasn't as noticeable as the scar though. I heard them talking to girls sometimes, saying how the morphine felt so good and they should switch over to that. In general, they didn't seem all that different. They weren't humbled. The only difference was they never bullied me again. One time Steve said something and RJ stopped him. I only thought about that today because the company I'm freelancing with just acquired another startup. The last time I was working at a company that bought another company was in 2012. They were based in San Jose. Anyway, I wasn't so high up in the company that I'd be there for any implementation or integration that they were going to do. That's not even my department. But when our VP got back, he said it went well, but one of their engineers said, I thought my real name was coming. I really wanted to ask him something. I asked what his name was. He said Steve. It didn't ring a bell until he made a motion between his eyes, and I instantly knew it was him. So I said, yeah, if I ever need to go out there, I'll pop in and see what he wants. And then the VP said that wasn't possible because he was one of the people that was let go. In 2015, I actually had to go out there for some work, so I thought I'd ask around and see where I could find him. The project manager I was working with told me over lunch that it was a real mess and that he told her, I have a plan not to get fired. Once he did, he just went off the rails, got really into drugs, and died some other way. I did track him down on LinkedIn and Facebook, and he had passed away. His LinkedIn said that he worked at the company, so I'm pretty sure it was him. But I just wonder what his plan was to not get fired and that he wanted to tell me. I always wonder about the time I hear acquisition, especially now, and I honestly think about how I acted. It was so out of character for me. I don't necessarily feel guilty about it though, and it's weird. I really felt like I was on autopilot when it all happened. Okay, so buckle up because this is going to get weird. This isn't something unknown amongst my friends and the people local to me as I live in quite a small town. Please let me know if I broke any rules and I'll be sure to edit. So in grade 9, I would have been about 13 or 14. I had no friends. I was and still am kind of weird and it threw people off. Making friends in high school for me was so difficult because I refused to change who I was just to fit in. During the second week of school, I met George in my English class. Our school teacher had sat us next to each other and we had begun talking and building a friendship. George was very nice and we had a lot in common. He had come from a different elementary school. It was odd because the people from his elementary school commonly went to a different high school. Although he insisted that he wanted to go to this high school because there were certain classes he wanted to take that the other school didn't offer. After about a week of talking together during English, he asked if I wanted to eat lunch with him. We had the same lunch period and he said he noticed how often I sat alone to eat. I thought it was the nicest gesture, so I agreed. We ended up having lunch together for a while, but then I started to make some new friends. I always invited him to eat lunch with a few of the friends that I had made, but he always declined. Then one day in English class, he passed me a note. This was very strange since we were sitting right next to each other. The note said something like, "I need to talk to you. Can we please sit alone together for lunch?" I wrote back that I would sit with him and we hardly spoke the rest of the period. I got a really strange vibe. So it's lunchtime and I see him sitting at the end of the row. Our cafeteria consisted of large harvest tables and benches. It was not separate tables with chairs like you'd see in a restaurant, but rather long tables with benches on either side. I go to sit down and he says, "No, we gotta go outside." So I agreed. He looked very upset and I wanted to know what was going on. When we got outside, he led me over to sit on a curb in front of the school and started talking very aggressively. He told me that it was unfair of me to make other friends when he was the one who befriended me first. He told me that I had to eat lunch with him because when I was alone, he ate lunch with me, so now that he's alone, I was obligated to eat with him. It was a very bizarre conversation. I explained that he could sit with me and my friends and that there wouldn't be any issues and he could even make some new ones. I told him I had enough friendship to spread around and that he had nothing to be upset about. What he said next completely shocked me. I could see the anger in his eyes. He grabbed my arm and said, "I don't think you understand. You owe me this, and you will sit with me." I got completely freaked out at that point and told him that we could sit alone together every other day. I just wanted to get away from him and go back inside where more people were around. After this day, I started getting weird messages in my email. I'll never forget the first email I was sent. It said, "All women are Satan. The devil lives in you all." I didn't recognize the email address and assumed it was some internet troll trying to scare me. Then they started coming more frequently, all with the same type of message. I started getting scared, so I showed my friends these emails. They agreed it was weird, but also agreed that it was probably some random person trying to scare people. But my one friend, Stacy, told me that she thought it was George, that she had heard stories about why he came to our school instead of going to the high school his grade 8 graduating class was going to. She told me that he was obsessed with one of the girls in his class and that her mom actually got a restraining order against him over the summer. I told her that sounded insane and I didn't really believe it. I was still having lunch with George on alternate days and we were still friendly during English class, but I really wanted to distance myself from him. After Christmas break, our schedules changed for second semester. I was honestly very happy about this because I knew I'd have a different lunch period than George and we wouldn't have English together anymore. I could slowly dissociate myself from him, but I was wrong. He started leaving notes in my locker, confessing his undying love and explaining that we were meant to be, to take over the world together, which at the time I thought was very nice of him to say, but the feelings were not mutual. Eventually, I had to tell him that enough was enough. I explained that he was overwhelming me and that I needed a little bit more space from our friendship. He seemed to understand, and he didn't get upset or yell. He just agreed to give me my space, which lasted about 2 days before the emails started getting worse. Started threatening my life, telling me they knew where I lived and went to school. I went straight to my mom when this started happening. I know I probably should have done that sooner. She called the police, and the police informed the school, and the school looked up the email in their records and found out that it was George sending the nasty emails all along. George was suspended and wouldn't even look at me anymore. I was honestly relieved. 1 year after we graduated high school, George and his mother went for a drive. While she was driving, he stabbed her over 100 times. He had a psychotic break. When the police found him, he tried saying it was a car accident, but when they questioned about all the stab wounds, he admitted to killing her and trying to release the devil from his mom's soul. He pleaded insanity against the murder of his own mom. He was found not criminally responsible for her murder. Gather around, folks, as I recall to you the details of the most WTF moment of my life. I'm typing this up on my phone, so I apologize in advance if I make any grammatical errors or the format isn't quite perfect. Now on with the show we go. This takes place sometime around the summer of September 2010. I, 25 female, was about 14 or 15 years old at the time. My family wasn't super financially well off, but my dad managed to pull together a family camping trip to Savannah, Georgia. Though Savannah wasn't home to the most beautiful of beaches, it was a beach that held a lot of sentimental value. I remember camping on Tybee Island many times as a kid. I was over the moon excited to be going back for the first time since I was a much smaller kid, and this time I was getting to bring my best friend. The weekend had never looked more enticing. The trip started off normal. We got to the campsite and my dad started to set up his tent. My oldest brother and his girlfriend were just hanging out. My older brother busy exploring the site, and my friends and I were hanging out on the picnic table, near the rather small tent. After everything was set up, we were all just hanging out, relaxing as it was already getting late by this time. Might be worth mentioning that I come from a 420 friendly household, so please refrain from judgment. Anyways, we were just chilling and smoking a little joint when our camp neighbor pops out from his tent. He must have smelled our ganja, so he came over and introduced himself. We'll call him Dan. He's in his mid-50s, around 6 foot. Give or take an inch or two. About ear length, wavy, Gracie looking gray hair. Kinda made my skin crawl a little bit, but So Dan comes up and introduces himself and asks to smoke with us. My friends and I didn't partake in the group chat as we just didn't really give a crap, like most teen girls wouldn't, so we just conversed amongst ourselves close by so we could still smoke, but far enough away that we wouldn't have to engage in conversation with Dan. I wasn't too worried as I had my 2 older brothers and my dad there to protect us, and the one thing about the middle oldest brother is that he was a wild little shit who would probably kill the guy if he tried anything funny. But regardless, I was still aware of how much Buddy gave me the heebie-jeebies. However, he didn't try anything, so that was cool. Just played guitar with my dad and oldest brother until we all decided to crash. That night, my friend and I decided to sleep on the picnic table. The tent with my dad felt too small, and we felt too cool to share one with him. One of my brothers was already sleeping in the car, and my eldest brother took off with his girlfriend to go sleep on the beach. So we decided, screw it, let's sleep on the table. Bad idea. We spent the whole night getting eaten by mosquitoes and feeling like we were being watched. It was terrible. 10 out of 10 would not recommend. We slept in the car the rest of the trip. The next morning, Dan popped up on us again as we were smoking a morning bowl while readying ourselves to go get breakfast. My dad, being the total gent that he is, invites Dan to come along. At this point, he seemed normal enough. Stinky, but nice enough. Never said anything weird to me or my friend, but I could just feel something off about him. But again, I felt safe with my brothers and my dad. I felt like just the appearance of my dad would be enough to make him steer clear of us. My dad's not too tall, but he is fit, covered in tattoos with long hair and several facial piercings. Total metalhead, and despite his big heart, he had the male equivalent of a resting bitch face. So breakfast started off normal. We're all baked and giggling, enjoying our scrumptious-ass breakfast, when all of a sudden Dan pipes up. He starts talking about the show Hannah Montana. We all exchanged glances like, is this grown-ass man really raving about a teen television series? So we all sit back and listen. Dan goes on about how beautiful Miley Cyrus is, and how he hates the character Oliver and how cool the character Lily was. We're all looking like, what the heck? When the real dinger gets thrown out there, this guy, this poor delusional man starts telling us that he's in a relationship with Miley. That when she has a love interest in the show, it's really just a subliminal message that she's sending to him. That her lyrics and her music are for him. We obviously didn't question it because we're all pretty clear that this guy's off his rocker, so what would be the point? We all just kind of nod our heads and hurry up on finishing our breakfast. Nobody even had to say what we were all thinking, so we just tried to kind of shrug him off if he ever approached us again. We all kind of caught on to how weird he was, and everybody just kind of steered clear of him from then on. Later that day, after we digested our food a bit and relaxed, we smoke again. All that good stuff. We all decided to hit the beach. The part we went to was near a pier and a bunch of shops, so my friend and I decided to wander around and get a little time away from all the testosterone. We roam the shops a little bit and pick out some cute necklaces and the works, then decide to head over onto the pier. Now the entrance of the pier has this little gazebo type stuff with tables and drink machines. So my friend and I decided we were going to plant our little tired asses there and cool off for a bit. We're chilling there, talking about normal teen crap when I spot Dan sitting just a couple tables behind ours. My friend was sitting with her back towards Dan's direction, so I quietly let her know that Dan was there watching us and we should skedaddle. So we get up and start heading towards the beach. We get off the pier and make it to the beach and think we're in the clear. We hadn't seen him get up after us, but of course we were wrong. Not long after entering the beach part of the area, we peep that he's walking behind us. Not too close, but close enough that it's blatantly obvious that he is indeed following us. So we silently came up with a plan in case he got a hold of us. We agreed that we would jump him if he tried anything. We were two small teen girls, but my friend was a crazy little Gemini who had also been attending kickboxing classes regularly for years. This girl could roundhouse kick the crap out of him, and he 100% wouldn't expect it. So she made me feel brave and unafraid. The best kind of friend to have in a situation like this. However, as unafraid as I may have been, I still knew our best shot would be finding either one of my brothers or my dad. Fortunately for us, we saw my brother and his girlfriend relaxing on the beach, not too far ahead. So we hurried up to them, and Dan veered off somewhere else. Once we were sure he was gone, we started telling my brother about Dan following us. He was clearly bothered, but just told us to stay near and keep an eye out. Let him know if he says anything weird, and that was that. No idea if he wanted to snatch us up or simply just follow us around. I don't recall seeing Dan again that night or on our last day there. His gear was gone by morning, and we all breathed a sigh of relief because let's be real. However sad it may be that he was so very clearly mentally ill, Dan was weird, and we were all pretty stoked to spend our last day without him. Our last day was great. We all had a blast, and Dan never came back. So we packed up and waved goodbye to Savannah as we all laughed and discussed all the crazy stuff Dan had said on that trip. But we could all agree that this seemingly super nice and normal middle-aged man had given us a trip to remember. But wait, there's more. So after about a week or so of being home, my dad was watching the news when guess who pops up on the screen? You guessed it. Headlined, Miley Cyrus stalker arrested in Savannah, Georgia after trying to gain access to studio. Or something crazy along those lines, but it was 100% him, no mistaking. As they said his name and listed our vacation weekend in Savannah as the time and place of his arrest. And of course the picture solidified any prior doubts. It was him. So during that weekend when he wasn't with us, he was actively stalking Miley Cyrus and was arrested for trying to get into the studio or wherever that she was filming at. And that's why he wasn't there that last day. So we decided, screw it, let's Google this guy. Turns out that wasn't the first time he had been arrested for stalking her. Dan had been arrested in a couple of different states as he had been following her around the country. He genuinely believed they were in love. We found a video of him on YouTube being interviewed by some news dude. Different incident than the Savannah arrest. Dan was talking about how he was there to see Miley and that he was going to ask her to marry him. He looked so jittery and excited, like somebody who was truly excited to propose to the love of their life would be. I think that's part of what weirded me out the most. He really and truly believed it with all of his heart. And that, my friends, is terrifying to say the least. So there you have it, internet dwellers. The story of my camping trip with the official Miley Cyrus stalker. I changed his name as I'm not certain of the rules as far as naming criminals go, but a simple Google search should suffice for anyone who's truly curious. As a last thought, I'll leave you with this. I kept wondering why Dan was drawn to my friend and me, and recently I relayed this story to a friend. Something dawned on me. Hannah Montana, or Miley, on the show was a brunette, and her best friend Lily was a blonde. I was a brunette, and my friend was a blonde. So what if he saw us and had some weird thought of us being like them or something? I don't know, could be a stretch, but my mind was blown when I thought about it. Anyways, that's about it. I hope you enjoyed my story. It's one I always enjoy telling because it's just so, what the heck, you know? LOL. My friend and I are still super close, and it's something that gets brought up at least once or twice a year, either with her or with my family. A memory to last a lifetime for all involved for sure. So at least we have that. I live in an apartment complex in a quiet neighborhood with my girlfriend and our dogs. A neighbor will get the occasional domestic disturbance call for an argument or loud party, but never anything particularly crazy. About a year ago, I was taking my lab outside early in the morning when we were approached by a dirty-looking guy who got out of a rundown pickup truck with no license plates. My dog is 12 and has always been the sweetest toward other humans, but for some reason she went absolutely nuts at the mere sight of this guy. Something definitely felt off and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. At about the same time, my dog showed her hackles. He waved to me and asked if I knew what apartment the girl who drives the white Equinox lives in because he gave her a ride home last night. Needless to say, there were some red flags here. Number 1, why are you pointing to her car that's in the parking lot if you took her home? Number 2, even if I knew you, I'm not telling you. If you took her home and she wouldn't even let you in or tell you where she lived, that tells me all I need to know. I told him I don't know and I'm sorry I can't help him. My dog still hadn't stopped barking. Apparently that answer wasn't good enough, as he followed me into my building and said, "Come on, buddy, I just need to ask her something." I reiterated that I don't know her and I couldn't help him. Still not good enough. He began following me up the stairs, repeating himself about the girl who drove the Equinox. At this point, it's taking everything I have to keep my dog from ripping his face off. I finally managed to pick her up and walk up the stairs. As I got on my floor and was opening the door to my apartment, he came through the door that separates us from the stairs and began asking in a more aggressive tone. Mind you, I'm taller than this guy, covered in tattoos, worked out fairly regularly at the time, and had a large dog who was snarling at him. I'm far from a badass or anything, but I'm not usually the type of person somebody targets to harass. Up until this point, I was speaking to him very politely. There was clearly something off about him, and I just wanted him to go away, but screwing with somebody at their home is crossing the line. He kept approaching me as I was opening the door, so I finally told him, "Dude, if you come through my door, I'm going to blow your brains out." And this wasn't a bluff. I keep a handgun by the door due to some run-ins in my past. That, along with my tone of voice, was apparently enough for him to get the message, as I watched him run out of the door and back to his vehicle from my window. I notified the apartment manager and they said they would contact the police and figure out who drove a white Equinox in my building so they could alert her as well. I have no idea what he intended to do had he gotten in my apartment, or what his intentions were with the girl he was looking for. I'm just glad my dog has a great sense of character. This happened a couple of years ago, but I'm going to tell the experience in present tense as I feel that will make it easier to follow and to write in general. In case you're wondering what we look like, I'm at the time a 17-year-old 100-pound red-headed chick who's the furthest thing from intimidating that you'll ever see. My boyfriend Ian is a 22 super skinny white dude with shaggy hair and a bunch of tattoos. He's the second least intimidating person you'll ever see. Ian and I have a picnic every Thursday evening. The location usually varies, but we usually end up at our favorite spot, which we refer to as the best spot. Now, the reason it's called this is because we live in the dirtiest dregs of the most ghetto part of town, but amidst the abandoned buildings and blankets of graffiti lies a historical house surrounded by towering weeping willows and shrouded with vines. Across from the mansion is a beautifully secluded field with gardens and the greenest grass you've ever seen. It even has solar garden lights so that the whole place is dimly lit at night. Because of the giant trees and the fact that most of the street is abandoned, there's never really anyone there. It quickly became our favorite place to go. So we are having our picnic and we're smoking a blunt in a tree when we notice a passerby. Rare. It piques our curiosity, but we don't think much about it and go back to minding our own business and getting high and pretending like nothing bad could ever happen to us because, we're teenagers. This stranger appears to be in his late 20s, kind of short but really burly. He's wearing a gray hoodie and some baggy pants. He has a face tattoo. I don't know how relevant that is, but maybe it will help you paint a picture of him in your head. We see him a few more times as he nervously paces up and down the street, but once again we're in the ghetto. Our neighbors sell meth. A homeless guy lived with us for 6 months. We just assumed he's a tweaker or a drug dealer, or maybe just a lost soul, and go about our picnic without giving it a second thought. The sun begins to set and we decide to head home before it gets dark. Our house is about 2 blocks away and conveniently difficult to find. There's this apartment complex, and hidden behind that apartment complex is another tiny quadplex where we live. So we are making our way up the quickly darkening street when Ian turns to me and whispers, "Pretty sure that guy's following us." I turn around to see the same guy who's been lurking a good distance behind us, maybe 4 or 5 intersections back. I, being the oblivious person I am, chalk it up to the weed just making Ian paranoid and kind of brush off his accusation and continue on with whatever dumb thing I'm babbling on about. A few seconds go by and he interrupts me again, this time with a deeper tone in his voice. "No, I'm telling you, he's following us." This startles me. For one, Ian isn't the type to ever be afraid of anything, and for two, I've never heard this tone of voice from him before. Well, how do you know he's not just walking in the same direction as us? So Ian tells me, turn around and look at him, notice where he is, then turn back around and act as though nothing's wrong. I turn to look at him. He's a bit closer now, but nothing too out of the ordinary, I guess. A couple seconds go by, maybe like 10, and when Ian says, "Okay, now look again." This time I turn back to the man, and he is significantly closer. Every time we turn around, he starts running towards us, but when we turn back to look at him, he pretends to be casually walking again. At this point, he's only about 20 feet behind us, and we're stuck in that fight or flight moment where we only have a few seconds to determine the next step. We cross the street as a final requisite. The man crosses too. Me. So, what do? Ian says, "Run." And then he bolts away, leaving me in the dust. Now let me tell you something about Ian. He was a track star in high school. In the 3 seconds it takes me to comprehend what was happening, he's already halfway up the street and around the corner. It's like that scene from every zombie movie where some jerk trips his friend and leaves him to be eaten alive while he escapes through a conveniently placed door. The thing about me is I'm a terrible runner. It's one of my biggest weaknesses, actually. I take off running and at some point glance back just to see if the guy is chasing me, which he is, and he's right on my tail. The worst part about all of this is that I don't have a wallet or anything of value, so even if his intention is just to rob me, there is no way this is going to end well. There's no one around. Absolutely nobody. I make it around the corner towards the apartment complex and am luckily much more familiar with the area than this guy is. I plummet into the apartment gates and zigzag through some of the tiny buildings, run through a clearing and past the first quadruplex, which is identical to mine, circle around and then haul ass to my front door. I've been running so fast that by now I have no idea if this guy is still behind me or how close behind me. In a moment of sheer panic, I fumble for the keys and somehow manage to get them in the doorknob, even though my hands are shaking like Elvis Presley. I fling the door open and slam it behind me and lock it as fast as I can. Then I wait in terror. Did I lose him? Did he see where I went? Is he going to come back later? What does he want? Is he going to bust out one of the many windows and murder me? I simply don't know. I don't have the slightest idea what this guy's intentions are, but there are windows all around, and even the door is basically one big window. Luckily, all the blinds are down, but you can still see shadows, and there's a broken blind on the door where anyone can peek in or out. I sit on the ground beneath the door in hopes that I've lost the guy, in hopes that he didn't see where I went. A few moments pass, but it feels like an eternity. Ian is nowhere to be found. I don't have any weapons, and I'm paralyzed with fear that he will see me through the blinds if I stand up or try to make it to my phone. Then it happens, the shadowy figure peering through the broken blind. I can only see his half-muffled silhouette, but I know he's looking inside. I'm ducked down, hopefully out of sight at the bottom of the door, and completely frozen. He stands there for at least a minute and eventually leaves. To this day, I don't know if he saw me enter the house or if I got lucky enough with the whole zigzag routine to make it inside just in time for him to not be sure which door I went into. I don't know what he wanted or why he was chasing us. I also don't know why he didn't just attack us in the field when there was nobody around and we were in such a secluded location. Anyway, the moral of the story is, screw Ian. This happened like 4 or 5 years ago when I was 17 years old. I had a girlfriend. I'm also a girl, and I was at her house for the day. At this time, I didn't have a good relationship with my mom, so I would sleep for weeks at my best friend's house. So I realized it's like 1 a.m. and I decided to call an Uber. As I live in a kind of small city, so buses stopped passing by at 10 p.m. approximately. I called the Uber and asked it to wait at the end of the block so it wouldn't have to take an unnecessary turn. When it got there, my girlfriend went with me so we could say goodbye. We hugged and kissed, but that kind of kiss that lasts like 2 seconds. I waved to her as I turned to sit on the passenger seat of the car and say hello to the driver. He replied to my greeting and started driving. He looked okay at first, but I was really wrong. He was in his mid-40s, his head was shaved, and he had a large tattoo on his arm. He asked me if I was a student, and I replied yes. Then he asked what I was studying at college, and I told him that I was actually in my last year of high school. He said that I looked a lot older, and I just awkwardly laughed. This is when things started to go downhill. The conversation went something like this. "Was that your girlfriend? The girl you kissed?" Yeah. How long have you been together?" "1.5 years." "Wow, that's a really long time, so are you a lesbian?" Why?" "Don't be ashamed. I'm not homophobic or something. I actually really like lesbians," he said. "Oh, so are you? And how do you do it if none of you has a dick?" "I really don't want to talk about that," I said. "Why? Sex is normal. I want to know how you do it." Me. Have you ever been with a man?" he said. "Sorry, but I don't think it's appropriate to talk about this." Then he said he wanted to experiment a bit and have a threesome with 2 girls. "Do you like men?" he said. "Not really," I said. "It's okay. We don't have to literally have sex." He said he could just stand there and look as he touched himself. Me. "We are not interested in that kind of stuff." Then he asked me how I know I don't like men if I've never been with one. "Have you ever wondered what it's like?" he asked. Friendly reminder that I was 17 at the time. My girlfriend was 16, and this creep was damn near 40 or older. At this point, I'm freaking out. This guy was taking another route to take longer to arrive at my friend's house, and I remember thinking, well, these are the last moments of my life. This guy is taking me somewhere else. Maybe it sounds a bit extreme, but where I live is not that uncommon for this kind of stuff to happen. I'm an atheist, but seemingly a miracle happened and my friend called me. I put him on speaker and he asked me how much more I'm going to take because he was worried. So I replied that the Uber driver is taking another route, but I'll be there soon and ask him to wait for me at the front door. The creep panicked and took me to my friend's place. I opened the door and ran as fast as I could to hug my friend. At that moment, I walked in the house. I just fell to the ground and cried my soul out. I'm a guy and this happened to me in 2012 when I was 25. I was pretty oblivious to a lot of things in life and always had the tendency to give people the benefit of the doubt, although much less so now. I was having trouble finding direction after university, jumping from job to job, getting more and more discontent with how my life was going. I came across a post on a popular social media site that was advertising that they were looking for young people to do seasonal work in the US. I thought I had nothing to lose. The money to be made sounded promising, and it would be an opportunity to have an adventure. I contacted them, got the process going, but still was unsure of really going. My current boss was a real self-centered prick. One morning soon after, we had a particularly bad falling out, which resulted in me calling him a lot of 4-letter expletives and walking off the job while literally tearing my uniform shirt off and throwing it on the floor. That was the sign I needed to jump at the opportunity to go on the trip. I got a job offer from a farmer in rural central/northern Idaho within the week, and about 3 weeks later, I was on the plane to Salt Lake City and then onto a 7+ hour bus trip to the farm. After a few hiccups, a delayed flight, and a bit of stress, I got there. The 8 months went by flawlessly and I had an amazing time. Great employer, making a lot of friends, and seeing so many awesome sights. This event started folding out about 2 weeks before I was due to return to my home country, in late November. Temperatures were below freezing already most days, and snow was sticking. I got home on a Friday evening about midnight after watching movies at a friend's place. I was a pretty serious night owl at that age and could function on 3 or 4 hours of sleep for months on end without problems. I called my parents around that time because of the time difference. It was around midday back home. Talked for about an hour or so, and when I hung up, I heard a vehicle drive up our shared driveway. The layout of the apartment block was as follows. 2 blocks of 4 units each. 2 on the ground floor and 2 on the first floor. 8 total. We had a shared driveway with all units facing the driveway and 1 parking space for each unit next to each other, right in front of the bottom unit's front doors. I lived in number 4, which was the right-hand side of the top unit in the first block. The creep this story is about lived in 6, which was the bottom right-hand unit in the second block. His name is Corey. The way my unit was laid out, I would have full view of the whole driveway and all of the car parkings all the way into the street. Unfortunately, there was very little light in the parking area as the street lights did not reach down the driveway. Now back to the story. I peeked out of my front window and saw it was the guy from number 6 coming back, as I recognized his truck in him as well from his stocky build, beard, and shaved head. I could hear he was mad and probably drunk because he was bellowing some nonsense and shouting something towards his girlfriend, who got out of the passenger side. He started kicking and punching some of the vehicles in the parking area, proceeding to knock the window out of an F-150, breaking down the railing from the stairs, leading to the second floor units. He went on for about 15 minutes with his vandalism and violent outbursts before his girlfriend herded him inside and it got quiet. Nothing else happened, so I got in bed because I had work that Saturday morning. When I got home about 5 p.m., there was a police cruiser in the driveway. I went up to my unit, and a while later there was a knock on my door. I opened up, and it was the officers. They inquired if I had seen something the previous night about the property damage outside. My normal consensus would be to stay out of anything that does not affect me personally, but I did not want to lie to the police in a foreign country and risk getting in trouble. So I gave a vague and short description of what I had witnessed, making sure to not directly point to the guy in number 6, just saying a guy with a shaved head. They thanked me and went on their way. That Tuesday morning, I got a loud knocking on my door again. As I peeked out the front window, I saw the guy from number 6, Corey, pacing on my porch, shouting to open up as he knows I'm inside. I get cold, immediately thinking, "Aw man, now I'm gonna get beaten up." About 5 minutes later, my employer pulls up and the guy storms off. I go to work with my ass shitting bricks the whole day. I considered contacting the police officer that took my statement but decided against it as I do not want to cause more trouble. I get home pretty late and a little while later I see Corey's girlfriend walk over and come knock on my door. I open up and she asks if she can have a chat. I say sure and step outside. She explains to me that he is on probation and any incidents will cause him to go back to jail. I said to her, then he should not have acted out and vandalized people's property. After a bit of back and forth, I gave her the copy of the statement I had, showing I did not imply him directly, only giving a general description saying it was dark and I could not see much. That put her a bit at ease. I told her I will retract the statement saying I was sleepy and unsure of what I saw if he stays away from me. She said she will talk to him. A couple of hours later, I get a knock on my door and it's the girlfriend. Corey stands at the bottom of the stairs saying he wants to apologize. I go outside seeing my neighbor on his porch. I feel pretty apprehensive as it's the first time I lay eyes on the guy. He is pretty big, about 6 foot, 250-pound bodybuilder type with swastika tattoos on the visible parts of his arms. I shake his hand and we have a lighthearted conversation on my porch, and he apologizes. Offers me his cell number and takes mine, saying if I ever want to hang out, I should text him. I thank him and they walk off. I make a decision to never contact him as I don't like associating with extremists. On Friday, I only work half a day, and as I got back to my apartment, just as Corey and his girlfriend drive in, we greet and they invite me to go out with them for dinner. I decline, but they insist. I eventually agree. They say we can all drive together. We meet up at 3 and it's only him. He says his girlfriend doesn't feel well. I get in his truck and we drive down to a local Mexican restaurant. Initially, we have a good conversation, but it starts to die down. We finish eating, pay and walk out. I wanted to walk the almost mile home, but he insisted I get in the truck with him as we are both going the same way. I feel uneasy but get in. We drive out of the parking, but he turns the opposite way of going home. I ask him where we are going. He says he wants to show me something, and he says where they always went snowboarding when they were in school. All in this monotone voice without making eye contact. At that moment, I went from being uneasy to being scared. I'm not a small guy or anything at 6'2" and about 220 pounds, but I physically have no chance against him. We drive out of town and towards the mountains. He turns off the asphalt onto a gravel road leading up into the mountains. I get more freaked out. After about 30 to 40 minutes of driving, he stops in the middle of the road. It's starting to get dark out, and I have not had cell service for the past 20 minutes. He gets out and takes out a hunting rifle from behind his seat. He talks for the first time since we left the diner, except for answering my question about where we are going. He says, in that same monotone voice without making eye contact, "Now we go hunting." I'm shitting bricks at that point, saying I will wait for him in the truck. He looks at me, and for the first time I see his eyes. Dark, dilated, and I can see the hate in them. He barks, "Get out." I get out slowly, my phone in hands, looking for nearby trees that I can run into, or anything I can use for cover, as I am sure that I am the one that is going to be hunted. As I start walking around the truck, my phone rings. It rips me out of my daze. I was like, how the heck do I have cell reception here? I look at the screen and see it's one of my friends calling. I answer, and her voice is the most beautiful sound I have ever heard. I immediately tell her where I am and with who. She asks me if everything is okay. I tell her if she does not hear from me again in 30 minutes to call the police. The call starts breaking up. I repeat that if she doesn't hear from me in 30, to call the police and tell them what I just told her. The call cuts out and I look at Corey. His eyes are shooting daggers at me, red in the face, and he looks like he is about to burst an artery in his head. So mad. I tell him to take me home, turn around, and get back in his truck. He puts the rifle away, gets in, and drives like a madman back the way we came. The whole ride back, he does not say a word or make any eye contact. We get back to the apartment complex where we live, and he stops in the street, but does not turn into the driveway. I jump out before the truck even comes to a complete stop. I see my friend's car parked to my spot. I did not have a car, and she came running towards me as soon as she saw me. We go into my apartment, and I explain the events to her. She goes white, and when I told her who the guy is, she tells me to pack my bags, and I'm staying with her and her family. I pack my stuff, and we leave. We get to her house, and her dad asks if I'm okay, as she had filled them in after the phone call. I explain it again, and her dad asks me who the guy was. I said his name and gave a description. Her dad got a somber look on his face. He explained that I was very lucky and we should contact the police immediately and give a statement. Also, because he was on probation, or parole, unsure which one. It was illegal for him to possess a firearm. Called the officer that took my initial statement, and he came by the house. He was friends with my friend's dad, and I gave a statement. I flew back to my home country a week later. I stayed with my friend and her family for that week as work was just about done, and they were having Thanksgiving, etc. The Sunday after the event, her dad and I were making a roast in the barbecue in the garage. And he filled me in a little bit. He went to school with Corey. Since school, Corey has been a bad seed, dealing drugs, getting in fights, and just being a generally unproductive waste of a human being and a burden on society, really. His first stint in jail was just after 18 when he got caught with more than a pound of weed in his possession. He got 3 years for it as it was his first offense. The second stint was shortly after he got out. A nature conservation officer caught him hunting illegally, and when he confronted him, Corey flipped out and beat the officer half to death. That got him 10 years. His stay got extended. How long, I'm not sure, because he shanked a couple of inmates and jumped and assaulted a prison guard. He also told me that the police picked up Corey on Friday night and found him with a loaded rifle in his truck. He was promptly arrested as it was a violation of his probation. Our interaction took place a few months after he got out the second time. Her father said there were rumors of him shooting a rival dealer in a city close by, but nothing could be proven. He also is/was a proud member of the white supremacists. I saw his girlfriend the night before I flew back at the grocery store, and the look she gave me is one of pure hate and anger. I still wonder if she was in on the plan or knew what he was planning to do. This is pretty much where the story ends. I lost contact with my friend and have not been back there since. Also don't plan to, as I have had enough of redneck neo-Nazis. So, Corey, maybe you just wanted to take me out on a hunting trip and I overreacted, but with your history of violence, I highly doubt that. You had sinister, premeditated plans to take me out into the forest and hunt me like prey. And for that, I hope you rot in prison. Society is a better place without you roaming around freely. My best friends and I are both females and are 18 years old, but quite short and young looking. I'll call her Rose. We are walking down a very quiet street in Sydney, a little bit lost. I'm usually very alert when in public places, being a young woman. We were talking about albums and music, and a man jogged past us. He He was looking at us, and I made eye contact with him the whole time before he stopped about 10 meters up. He looked to be in his late 30s. I already got a bad feeling about things, and I signaled that to Rose. He stopped us and asked us if we had any music suggestions. Awkwardly, we said no, and he said, "But you were just talking about albums." Keep in mind, he had earphones in as he jogged past us and was only near us for a few seconds. Does this mean he was following us without us realizing? We tried to turn the conversation down every single time we spoke, but he began to follow us. Rose is shorter and younger than me, and it shows. His questions were more directed at her, and I immediately started to answer him before she could. He got mad at me and began to try and talk some more to Rose. He would comment on the clothes she was wearing, and I would do whatever I could to intervene. Rose made me aware of the swastika tattoo on his arm. He continued following us wherever we would go, despite us being in a very public area of the city now. It got to the stage where I grabbed Rose's hand and walked onto a busy road, pulling her across, narrowly avoiding cars. He still followed. We then started walking down some hill with no idea where we were. He stopped and asked why we were going that way, and we said there was a place we wanted to visit. With that, he turned around and jogged away. We still don't know what his intentions were. We always felt safe at the city during the day, but now things feel different. I had a flashback with all the details while talking to my girlfriend on the phone and telling each other our memories. After hours of reading people's memories on Reddit, I have something to share and I can't wait to see your reactions. This happened at the beginning of 2023. I, male 22 at the time, was working as a terminal attendant at one of the biggest airports in Europe. My job description was mostly to give directions to arriving and departing passengers in this airport as big as a city, to solve their problems and to solve visa and passport related problems as well. For some reasons I can't tell you exactly which airport it is, but you can probably guess from the details I will give. Since the airport is really huge and is in a very key location, it is one of the transfer points for passengers coming and going from Asia, Africa, Europe, and America. So it was in the nature of my job to encounter very strange types of people and events. I was working 12-hour shifts, some days at night and some days during the day, and the area I was working in was determined by daily assignments. This incident happened during my 12-hour night shift on the transfer floor of the airport, the common point where international passengers wait for passport control before picking up their luggage, and where the passengers of all incoming international flights flow. Actually, when we work, we are supposed to wait at a fixed point when passengers don't specifically call for us. But it was 3 o'clock at night, and since flights and passenger traffic slow down at this time of night, I decided to patrol around a bit. I left my station and went to the gate of the only arrival flight at that time of night. I decided to wait there in case passengers needed help when they opened the gate. After a while, the plane pulled up to the gate and the gate opened, and a lot of normal looking people walked out of the gate and into the transfer center. Except that woman, that strange looking woman who made me feel cursed by the cold January air. She was a brunette in her late 20s, covered in dirt and torn clothes. Her hair was missing in some places, and the hair that was there was rather unkempt, and I think a bit burnt. When she saw me in my uniform with unusually large pupils, she walked up to me, looking scared and confused. "Excuse me, do you work here? I need help." "Damn it, of course you need help." I wanted to take her arm because she was having trouble walking, but the smell emanating from her, don't judge, it wasn't a normal sweat smell, but it smelled like she was already dead, made my nose hurt, and I immediately abandoned the idea. I sat her down on a seat reserved for passengers, and I stood opposite her and asked her in a calm voice how I could help her. I had a very bad experience. That's why I'm running away from there. I haven't eaten for days, and I think there was something in the water they gave me on the plane. Since I drank it, I don't feel well and my mind is fuzzy. I didn't find what she was saying convincing. I thought she was in some kind of mental breakdown because her gestures and annotations when she spoke were very strange as well. But I was also familiar with the aviation rules, and I knew that something like this should be reported immediately to the police. When I told her this, she didn't like that idea, and she stood up and shook me by the shoulders and shouted, "No police. Never the police." Dude, she started laughing, looking up at the ceiling like there was something up there. The woman was making strange gestures with her hand, but her cheerful demeanor was broken by a sudden burst of crying. "No police. They won't like it." Hey, the police, that's their job. Who said anything about cops? I'm talking about the people who did this to me. As she said this, she lifted up the burnt hair that had fallen on her forehead and saw one of the strangest things I've ever seen in my life. Look, I've seen a lot of strange tattoos because of the environment I studied and lived in, but this was different. Right in the center of her forehead was a tattoo that looked like the barcodes on products in the grocery store with some numbers underneath. At first, I thought it was a strange fashion sense for aesthetic purposes, but her strange behavior and some documentaries I had seen made me think that it was probably used by human traffickers to mark people, like slaves, so that they could be easily identified and caught when they escaped. When she realized that I couldn't help her the way she wanted, she at least wanted to use my phone, but I told her she was not allowed to use my phone due to the airport security rules and that she could use the payphones if she wanted to. Of course, she didn't have any money with her and I was not allowed to give her any money. Since she showed aggressive behavior towards me every time I insisted on talking to the police, I finally decided to do it secretly and brought her some food and some water before going to them myself. When I arrived at the police station on the transfer floor, the policemen were taking advantage of the calm of the night to rest. When I told them what happened to me and pointed to the woman, they told me that she was one of the refugees coming into our country. My country hosts so many illegal immigrants and refugees. It's normal for them to think like that, and that she was acting like that because she wanted us to let her enter illegally. They didn't take it very seriously at all, and unfortunately, I had to leave without any solution. When I went back to the woman, I realized that she had not touched the food and water I had brought her and repeatedly refused to consume them with a fear in her eyes. I decided to have a conversation with the woman so as not to be too judgmental. When I asked her name, she gave me a very strange answer that I had never heard before. It was like a name from some ancient language, and even now I don't remember exactly what she said. When I asked her where she came from and where she was going, she said she didn't know. To get this information, I took her passport and her boarding pass from her hand. I don't remember exactly where she was coming from, but an Asian country, and her next destination was not written on the boarding pass, so her ticket was valid only until here. I decided to end our conversation, which was not very productive, and leave her alone to observe from a distance. I had to go back to my station for some paperwork and decided to take care of it in the meantime. Later that night around 6 a.m., my other colleague was due to arrive at the station to hand in my shift. I was going to exit through the door where they were going to enter the transfer center where we were, and before I left, I decided to stop by again on my way to see this strange female visitor. When I went up to her, she was holding a book in her hand. It was a book with old covers and yellowed paper, but I didn't understand what was written in it until she pointed at me and called me over. Even then I didn't understand it. It was a book written in an alphabet I didn't know, in a language I didn't know. And I don't want you to think I was making it up, but it was a book with strange figures of people and other drawings. The woman pointed to one of the drawings and said, "This is how they do this." "They do what like this? I'm confused. Can you be more specific?" When I said that, she shook her head from side to side, laughing. She had an expression as if I wouldn't understand even if she explained it. I told her that a friend of mine would be arriving soon in my place and that if she had any problems or needs, she could contact them as she wished. I gave her directions to the restroom, where she could get food, the police station, and the ticket office. After a few seconds of looking at my face, she thanked me in tears and took my hands in both of hers and looked me in the eyes. I didn't know exactly what happened to her, but at that moment my heart broke and I put my other hand over hers and nodded. It was time to leave when my friend, who was coming behind me to take my place, touched me and I introduced them to the woman and secretly informed her about the situation. My friend told me that they were going to take special care of her, said goodbye, and I finished my shift for the day. When I woke up the next day, I texted my friend and asked them how she was doing. They told me that after I introduced them to her, they left to take care of another passenger and that they never saw her for the rest of the day. They said that when they asked the passport police and ticket offices, they told them that they were busy enough as it was and that they didn't pay that much attention to people and brushed them off. I never saw this woman on my next shifts, and I never heard from her again. Still gives me goosebumps when I remember it. I would be interested in your comments on the incident. If there is anything I missed or you want to ask, let's meet in the comments. Thank you for reading or listening. I've never really sat down and written all of this out before, and I keep getting reminded about it. So I figured I could post it somewhere to kinda, I don't know, vent I guess. And since this subreddit is about encounters with creeps, I figured you guys might get some entertainment out of it too. So first of all, the woman I call Nana in this story isn't actually related to me, but for most of my life she and her husband were like grandparents to me. I grew up very poor and they lived in a nice house, so going to their house was like a super cool vacation to me. Well, then I was 12. Nana's husband, whom my sisters and I affectionately called Pappy, died from lung cancer. It was rough on me since his funeral was held on my 12th birthday, but it was obviously rougher on Nana. She changed after that and started acting like you'd expect someone to act if they were going through a midlife crisis. She bought a stripper pole, got a back tattoo, and things like that, even though she'd been pretty conservative before. And then she, out of nowhere, started dating and married another man like super fast. We'll call him T. At first, T didn't seem too bad. He was kind of weird, but I just thought it was because he was the new guy, as it were. Now, T, you need to know, was probably in his late 50s to early 60s, and I was only 15 or 16 when I met him. The first red flag came after T offered to take me for a ride on his motorcycle. I thought riding on a motorcycle would be cool since I'd never done it before, and he was Nana's husband. What did I have to worry about? So we're on the motorcycle and he's driving me around. Everything's fine, and then he tells me I need to scoot closer and hold on tight or I'm going to fall off. Obviously I listened to him, and that was the first time he touched my leg. Just a pat on my shin. I didn't think anything of it. But then he did it again and again and again. At that point I was getting a little bit uncomfortable, so I pulled away from him a little bit. He tells me I need to hold on, and when I hesitate, he no joke tells me, "I'm not trying to feel those big old titties on my back. I just don't want you to fall off." That should have been the moment where I told everyone he was a creep, including Nana, but I let it go like an idiot. Cut to a little while later, and T has continued to make me uncomfortable damn near every time I visit, but I still haven't told anyone anything. I wake up one morning and go to the kitchen to make some cereal. I'm wearing nothing but a long nightgown and panties, no bra or anything because I literally just woke up. Well, T comes into the kitchen and sees me standing at the counter. He walks up behind me, wraps both of his arms around my waist, and pulls me around him. I froze, but then he mumbled in my ear, "You're so sexy." Then he walked away. This was the breaking point. I told my parents and my then boyfriend, now husband, what happened. I refused to go back to Nana's the next time she asked me to go, and when I told her why, her only response was, "But he does that kind of stuff to everyone." Needless to say, I cut her out of my life for that. A few years down the line, I heard that T died, and Nana came groveling to me, trying to get me to meet with her. I went, but things between me and her have never been back to the way they were. I suspect they never will. I grew up in a small town in Alabama. A little bit after I graduated high school, when I was 18, I started dating this guy in his early 20s from a nearby city. He was very handsome, tall, muscular male that we'll call Sean for this story. He told me on our first date that he used to be part of a very well-known gang in the United States. Sean explained that he'd only been a part of this gang in his younger years because he'd grown up in a bad area and hadn't really had any other options. He also did have proof of being in said gang, including being aware of gang signs associated with said gang and having tattoos associated with that gang, which I did Google to see if the tattoos and gang signs were in fact associated with said gang, since I know there are some people who like to lie about being ex-gang members and the like for some reason to seem cool. But Sean didn't seem like the type to lie about that also. I gave Sean the benefit of the doubt because he didn't really give me any bad vibes. I remember he was always a gentleman to me and treated me very well. So of course I didn't really suspect anything about him. We dated for a few weeks before the night that I found out the truth about him. I was staying over at Sean's apartment one night and everything was seeming pretty normal. This was the first time I'd ever stayed the night at his apartment since I do tend to be a bit cautious. So regardless of his background, it wouldn't have mattered. I just don't really like staying over at people's homes until I get to know them a bit more. And I do have at least a 3-date rule. I'd been too busy before that to really stay over at his place. So that night when I was staying over, Sean's best friend was visiting for a bit. And that's when the red flags started to show up. It did seem weird to have a friend over when the girl you are seeing is staying over for the first time. And it was revealed to me that in private, Sean's friend was another ex-gang member from a well-known gang that is the enemy of the gang Sean had been a part of. Of course, I can accept people all have their backstories, but it was definitely just a weird thing to suddenly tell me out of the blue. Additionally, Sean had not even told me his friend would be at the apartment that day in the first place. An additional note, Sean's friend did not corroborate that he and Sean were both ex-gang members. Then after Sean's friend had left, we were hanging out in his room and this guy had a little arsenal in his room. I'm not exaggerating when I say he had enough weaponry to arm a small militia. This included things like grenades, bulletproof vests, an AK-47 or a gun similar to it, to name a few of the weapons he had in his room. Needless to say, that was the second red flag of the day. That night we were in bed together and I can't remember what led to him revealing to me what he said in our conversation. He confessed to me that he was in fact still a part of the gang he had told me he said he was out of now. So of course I was immediately giving him this look like, "I'm sorry, what?" Then he proceeded to go on to tell me that he actually was a hitman for the gang and, while he hadn't been active as a hitman as of late, he would still accept hits if they were given to him. The entire time he said this, he just looked me dead in the eyes with the most deadpan casual look, no feeling in his eyes, and spoke like he was talking about the weather. It was extremely creepy and I knew right then that this guy was a straight up sociopath. I didn't doubt that he was lying. I've met people who try to get clout by lying about things like this and he was definitely not one of those types. I did stay the rest of the night and then left the next morning and never talked to him again. I was definitely not going to keep on dating somebody like that. There's not really anything to the story after that. He never really tried to contact me after. I'm sure some people will probably wonder why I didn't just leave right after he told me he was a hitman. I didn't think it was a good idea to react strongly and immediately storm out of the apartment. I also didn't exactly feel like he was a danger to me personally, but he definitely had the vibe of someone who had killed people. The reason why I recognize that kind of vibe is another story. He was always very polite to me, but regardless, there was no way I was going to keep dating him, no matter how attractive he was. This just happened last night. I popped into the Kroger on my way home from work, a little late, like 9 or so at night, just trying to grab a few bagged salads and whatnot for dinner. As I was walking in, a possibly homeless dude was also shuffling in from the opposite direction. I didn't think much of it, but I noted it as I always do. Gotta always be aware and cautious as a smallish woman alone at night. This sub has only strengthened that for me. I'm a tattoo artist, so I don't exactly have the look of someone you want to mess with, but I'm also only 5'2", so always better safe than sorry. I'm shopping in produce and he shuffles by. Then I'm in the freezer and he shuffles by. Then I remember I needed more produce and go back and there he is again. At this point I honestly just thought, poor guy, it's pretty cold tonight. I bet as a homeless person you have to stay on the move. Keep walking around and you could get away with several hours in here, I bet. I wasn't creeped out at all yet. I did note that he had no basket or cart and no products in his hands. But again, I assumed he was just getting warm inside. So I finished shopping and see him a handful more times. I go to the self-checkout. I've barely started scanning things when he begins checking out at the register next to me. As I said, it was late and nobody was behind me waiting, so I was kind of taking my time scanning my always too many groceries, which is why it was weird he was still there a few minutes later. He still hadn't had a cart or basket to check out. I glanced out of the corner of my eye and saw him just standing there pushing buttons on the screen, reaching in his pockets like he was paying, but he wasn't ringing anything up. That set my alarm bells off, and I looked around to take note of anyone around, security or otherwise. And behind me, at the bagged rice, a man is standing in a yellow vest like the cart pushers, but it's a guy I've never seen before. I go to this store a lot and I see he's mouthing numbers to the homeless man. 2240. I glance back at the dude behind me and he's staring right at the vest guy, who then starts making small hand gestures back like they're communicating something. And at this point, neither of them is looking at me, but there is one on either side of me. I still wasn't sure if I was just being paranoid, so I gathered my groceries on my arm and then pretended to fumble my wallet and sent change everywhere. Both men began picking up the change for me, and while they were bent over, I just said, "Oh, thanks, don't worry about it. I'm in a hurry, gotta go," and practically sprinted out the door. Neither followed me right away, and there was no one parked near me. I flung all the groceries into the passenger seat and was pulling out only seconds later by the time I saw the shuffling man come out of the store, looking left and right like he was looking for me, but also maybe just to return my change. Still not sure if I'm reading too much into it, but I keep calling it my near kidnapping, which I hope is an exaggeration. I just need to get this out of my system as it literally just happened. So I female work 2 jobs and I'm currently in a temporary accommodation which unfortunately is notorious for housing drug dealers and ex-convicts. There are endless parties and it wasn't unusual to hear loud banging and people out of their minds screaming at each other. I keep myself to myself, but it still has become part of my everyday life. The police are here every other day. I returned home from my first job as normal today and then headed back out to my second one. As I walked out of my flat building both times to go to work, I noticed police cars and ambulances parked outside. Again, not an unusual sight, but it was the second time as I was leaving that an officer stopped me to ask if I heard anything the night before, and I said yes. There was some music blaring for a while, and then came the banging and shouting all around 1:30 a.m. I told him it sounded nothing out of the ordinary and he let me go. As I arrived at work, my colleagues were all gossiping as usual. I wasn't really acknowledging any of it. Not until just the 2 of us were assigned the job, my colleague explained to me that the guy below me battered his ex to death in a heated, drug-fueled rage, and that was likely what I was hearing last night, as apparently the ambulance was called half an hour later from when I heard all the noise. I am now in bed and there's still police hanging around his flat, but it's so hard to sleep knowing that somebody lost their life below me and that I was awake listening to it the whole time. It's surreal and I felt sick since I found out. I don't know how to process it. Yes, she was constantly going back to her abusive ex and strung out on hard drugs, but nobody deserves something like that happening to them. This tale is 15 years in the making. I work with disabled and vulnerable adults. One time I was grabbing a drink with a friend Joe and he asked if I could work for his girlfriend Jane. Jane and I got on like a house on fire. She had some physical disabilities but also some mental health issues, leading to her being prescribed a raft of antipsychotics. Joe was particularly on top of Jane's meds as he was training to be a mental health nurse. He had me filling in sheets as if I were working in a psych ward at their house rather than a private residence. Usually, I simply make sure the people I work with take their meds. Sometimes, if they're controlled drugs, I might need to fill in a tick box, but he had full-on sheets that I was expected to fill in as a nurse would. Over time, I realized how controlling Joe was and how much he used Jane's mental health against her. Gradually, I realized that if he attended doctor's appointments with her, she would get an increase in meds. If I attended with her, this didn't happen. Joe was getting me stressed out with how useless I was, not putting items back into the cupboards perfectly, or making spelling mistakes, and missing punctuation on the over-the-top med sheets. I didn't notice how quite off balance he was keeping me, but I was very stressed out. So stressed out, I had several episodes of insomnia. One of these episodes, the doctor concluded, led to me hallucinating twice while awake. The doctor gave me sleeping pills and the hallucinations didn't come back. When I saw Joe hit Jane for the first time, I did have the wherewithal to call social services, but Jane claimed it didn't happen. Joe said I'd misunderstood what was going on and that I didn't have any right to interfere in their relationship. The first time Jane left, he claimed I'd had undue influence over her and left me checking words I said in case I was somehow influencing her as a vulnerable person. When Joe pinned me to a wall by my throat because I tried to prevent him from hitting her, I knew that I needed to leave, so I mentally gave Jane until January to leave him, and then I would stop working there. I registered a complaint with Joe's nursing course about his treatment of the vulnerable. She left him before that Christmas. By June, without him influencing her doctors, she had been taken off all the psych meds and hadn't had an episode since she left. Almost as if her stressor wasn't present, her physical disabilities improved significantly as well in the years since she left. That's because of the lack of unnecessary psych meds. I haven't worked for Jane in years as she moved away to marry a lovely bloke. I do work for a young adult who is apprenticing in a workplace, and for his first 6 months, he has me in the breakout area identifying anything a disability charity can provide for his access needs. His colleagues chat away to me on their breaks, including one who is very proud of his daughter, a nurse. The daughter has a colleague who at first used to provide fun tales of a dumbass who came to work hungover naturally. Then the colleague turned up to work on a ward, while drunk or high. Then the colleague boasted about keeping an ex-girlfriend's interfering friend quiet by feeding her the girlfriend's drugs so she didn't call social services on him. The daughter has made a complaint. Then I got to see a photo of this colleague, and of course it was Joe, and I'm stuck here thinking about those times I hallucinated due to insomnia. Or did he put something in my tea? Hi, 28 female here. So this happened a week ago, but it still makes me kind of eek when I think about it. Okay, so last Friday after I knocked off of work, I went home and my brother, also 28, who I live with, texted me and asked if I wanted to meet with him and some friends at one of the nearby bars. I got there and went over to the bar to get a drink. My brother came and basically just pointed out to me where the table they were sitting at was. It was busy and there were only 2 bartenders working, so it was taking a minute. Sitting next to me at the bar was a dude. He was probably in his early to mid 30s. He was fairly clean cut, average height, average body type. Not attractive to me, but also not unattractive, just not my type. He initiated some small talk with me, which was fine, but things moved pretty fast. And when it started moving that fast, it got inappropriate. So he told me right off the bat, "You look like a vodka and tonic type girl." I told him no, that I was ordering a Jack and Coke. He rolled his eyes in an overly sarcastic kind of way and smiled, almost like he was trying to be intentionally charming, which wasn't working. He asked for my name, which my brother had previously called out, so lying seemed pointless. He introduced himself. For the sake of this story, I'll call him Jack. Jack made a few comments, mostly about how he thought I was pretty, and asked what I did for a living. Told him I'm a nurse. He said it was sexy, which to me was a little over the line for someone to just blurt out. I was finally able to order my drink, but I still had to wait. Jack told me that my boyfriend looked too ugly to be with me and suggested that I needed to be with a real man. He was referring to my twin brother. I told him that was very inappropriate and rude to say, but he just chuckled. Then he started showing me his tattoos. I'm completely ignoring him as of now. He lifts up my sleeves to see if I have any, and I pulled my arm away. He then, and I swear I can't make this up, pulls the back of my shirt and looks down and says, "You sure you don't have any?" I slapped his hand away and moved over to the table that my brother and friends were at. As I'm leaving, he asks, "Have you ever been with a woman? Like, is this dude drunk or stupid or horny or what?" When I got to the table, I told my best friend, who I date on and off on occasion, who told my brother also. Both of them went over to confront the guy. Aside from my brother shoving him to get him out of the bar stool, nothing extremely physical happened, but the two did chase him out of the bar. To my surprise, the owner of the bar actually kicked my brother and his friend out for that. That's when the two of them started pitching a bit. We eventually all left and just all went to our apartment. The manager texted my brother the next day and told him that their ban was lifted because the owner didn't know what happened. One of the bartenders also came forward and said that the guy had asked to lick her breasts earlier that evening. I don't know why he wasn't kicked out for that alone. Anyways, I like to have a fun time as much as the next girl, but I'm writing this to urge caution. Not only with women, but with everybody. There are a lot of creeps out there, and a lot of them I hear about in the sub, and I just want to tell everyone it's okay to have a good time, but just be careful out there. I don't know where to post this, but I need advice. It's long, but it's weird as heck, man. A little over a year ago, I was approached via Twitter by a girl claiming she wanted to work together. Her location was not only the same city as mine, but in the same community as well. After a brief convo in DMs, I realized this profile was strange. It was fake. Immediately, I block her and keep it moving. After this, it gets so much weirder. This person continues to make fake profiles, pretending to know me, and eventually went into using fake phone numbers like WhatsApp and texting out to use me. I never gave them my number. It's weird enough that this person is persistent in stalking/harassing me. I'm a freelance entrepreneur. A great portion of my income comes from online, so if it was up to me, I would just unplug, but I can't let this harm my career. But this person has gone onto my friends' numbers/profiles to contact them. I have no idea how. I am very discreet, and I do not interact with these friends online, and somehow this person has been finding them one by one over the past year and persistently harassing them, even making fake Facebook profiles to harass certain people I deal with. Not only my friends in the same area/group, but also friends I have from scattered cities/groups. When I tell you, and this is not an exaggeration, I have blocked over 100 Instagram and Twitter profiles, texting app numbers, and emails from this person. And keep in mind, you need a new email to make an Instagram. I'm a single man, and of course I have lady friends, but none of them are under the impression it is anything different. And I have no bad blood with any ex or former fling. I'm on good terms with everyone as far as I know. But somebody is targeting me and any person they think I date or talk to romantically. It has affected relationships with people I deal with. Either someone I know, I have no idea how close, but they are close enough, secretly hates me and wants to make my life a living nightmare. Or a stranger is obsessed with me and wants to run everyone around me away from me. I have prayed for this man, like honestly just asking God to reveal who this is to me or make it go away. After a year, the persistence is starting to wear me down. I have no idea who this is pressing me. I reported it to the police, but they haven't done much. I even tried to hire a digital private investigator, but the few I've contacted said they can't help me. Can anyone please give me some direction, man? It's sickening. Something has to give. Thanks. This happened when I was around 10. We lived in a small neighborhood in a not so busy street where everybody knows one another. I live in the second house down the street, and since it's a family house, my mom, my dad, and I live on the second floor. In order to get into our part of the house, you had to enter the garden door and pass by the main entrance to the first floor of the house. Go around it and walk up the stairs. You could not see the entrance to our house from the street. You had to walk in the garden, which had a fence around it, and take 2 turns to find the stairs to our doors. That day, my dad was going to work, so it was around 7 a.m. My mom was watching him leave with his car through the bedroom window, and I was sleeping soundly in the bedroom next to that. After a few minutes, my mom heard the door opening and footsteps, but didn't think much of it. She thought maybe my dad had returned because he forgot something. After a minute of silence, she felt something was odd since she wasn't hearing anything, and she turned around looking through the door of the bedroom and saw a stranger who was about to step in the room that I was sleeping in. My mom, who was scared shitless, grabbed the chair and closed the door of the bedroom slightly, shielding herself since she was only in a t-shirt and underwear, and started yelling at the man and motioning to him with the chair to get the heck out or she would call the police. At that moment, I was wide awake since a lot of the yelling was happening now, but I just shook it off, thinking it was my parents arguing. My mom finally was able to get the man out of our house, and he was repeating that he just wanted to use the phone since his car broke down, but she didn't give him any time to talk or explain. She quickly locked the door, called my dad to come home, and went into my room to tell me what just happened. My dad came home and searched our garden and basement but found nothing. Later we found out that the same man entered another house before ours, 3 houses down the street, and told the same story of having to use the phone once the woman came out of the shower and saw him in her living room. I don't know what his motive was or if he really needed to use the phone, but entering other people's homes without a knock on the door just seems really, really strange. Thankfully, we didn't ever see the man again. I work with disabled adults. Relevant for this story is that several housebound adults run online shops, and before home pickups were a thing, I used to run to the parcels to the post office. I used the same post office because it was on my route home and would frequently take all of the parcels from the same day at about the same time, so it would just take one trip. This meant I often encountered the same staff. One guy behind the counter started to be friendly in a socially awkward way. I would nod and keep it civil, and answer questions like, "How are you?" with "Fine," and "What are you up to today?" with same old, you know. He started saying, "Hi, Penny," when I came in. My name is not Penny, by the way, but one of my clients used their dead name, Penelope, on their return address, partly for anonymity, since it's not their name either, and I don't bother to correct them. I also don't bother to learn his name, which starts making me feel a bit guilty. One day he asked how I am after a long day. I think my shifts had started at 4 a.m. or something equally early, and I hadn't had lunch. Instead of my usual "fine," I answer with, "I'm exhausted. I started very early and I haven't managed to have lunch yet." He is overly sympathetic and tells me to go grab a chocolate bar on my way out. I thank him and say I can't because I'm on a diet. I'm not, but accepting the chocolate bar seems like a bad plan. He gets very concerned that I'm eating properly. I am a plump woman. This is not a necessary concern, and I end up taking a chocolate bar to stop the over-the-top concern. I don't think much of it. Seemingly unconnected incidents a month or so before Christmas. One of my vulnerable clients asked me for my help as one of their customers is claiming that no orders have come through. I think they're likely trying to scam the vulnerable person and help them send the proofs of postage to the relevant online companies involved. I don't think much of it. In the same fortnight, it seems like all of my clients with online shops have been hit by scammers, as they're all complaining about customers claiming they're not getting parcels. I didn't think much of it. I sent a large letter to a friend for his birthday, and he told me the post is slow and he hasn't gotten it yet when I wished him a happy birthday online. Didn't think much of it. I take parcels into the post office as usual, and a guy behind the counter, who I don't recognize, asks me if I'm Penny. I say no, and he looks at me funny. Then he hands me a card and says that the police really need me to call this number. I smile and take the card to be polite. I have no intention of calling it. Put it on my dashboard and forget about it. The next day, a client cancels on me, and I essentially get a long lunch break. I sat in my car eating my sandwiches. I figure I'll kill some time by calling this number. The policewoman asks if I'm Penny. I say no, but explain about my parcel drop-off, maybe causing confusion. She asks if I know anyone called Creepy McCreepyface, and I say no. She gives a description, and I ask if he worked at the post office. Over the course of that conversation, and the one I had later when I went in to talk to her in person, I discovered several things. Creepy had been describing me to his coworkers as his friend Penny, to the extent that some of them thought we might be dating, and one of them worried I might be his ex that he was having trouble getting over. He had taken several parcels that I had dropped off and hidden them either in his locker or under his desk. I'm not clear on that part. These were easily traced to that post office because he'd done this after I'd paid for them to be delivered and got the receipts and proofs of postage that I had helped a client scan for online companies. At first, the police thought he'd done it to several people because there were multiple return addresses. But nope, turns out it was just me. None of the return addresses were mine, and he didn't know my actual name, so I was advised not to get a restraining order because that would give him my actual name and address. He was, however, restricted from the areas of the addresses he did potentially know from the return labels. He was later charged and prosecuted, not for harassment or anything, but with some kind of postal crime, which resulted in him serving time because this wasn't the first time he had done something like this. He's also banned from working for the post office. I spent that Christmas having freakouts whenever I saw someone with a post office uniform at the door. Recently separated male 38, moved back to India and got on the Bumble dating app. Married for 9 years, I was very rusty as far as dating rituals go. Matched with Priya. Female 38. We chatted for a bit. We'd both lived in similar parts of Europe at different times in our lives. We also seemed to have a lot in common. She would talk to me a lot for about 4 to 5 hours a day, with very intricate and disturbing details of what happened in her marriage that didn't last long, to various abusive boyfriends along the way. Alcoholism, abuse, all kinds of stuff. This was all before we even met. The first date, where we met IRL, went spectacularly well. She came and stayed over with me at a swanky place that I had booked. We stayed there for 2 days, seeming to have natural ease in occupying each other's spaces. Every midnight, the landline of the hotel room would ring. The third day, I head back to my city, which is only 80 miles from hers. She calls me over the phone, wanting to know how far the bus ride to my house was, and casually says, "I love you." I was taken aback and didn't think much of it at the time. This was followed in days to come. "I want to be married to you. And I'm yours forever." I again head back to her city a week later. Booked a rather basic place, very close to her place. At 1 a.m. she gets a coffee craving. I call room service to order in, thinking that's what she wants. No, let's walk to this 24-hour coffee shop a mile away. So yeah, the neighborhood, although fairly upscale, had loads of feral stray dogs on the streets, and many drunken men would come our way, pretending to be lost and asking for directions. She seemed to be enjoying it a lot. We have coffee at about 1:30 a.m. She then wants to walk back and takes me to the corner of the road and says, "This is where a date didn't go well once and I was assaulted." My legs were shaking at this point. We start walking further. We pass by a broken clay sculpture. She goes, "I have a strong suspicion that this broken sculpture is possessed. I know all about it. My ex-husband's sisters were into witchcraft." We are back at the hotel. It's about 2:30 a.m. We go to sleep. The phone, landline of the hotel room, rings incessantly. The next morning, she calls a cab and goes back to her place. I don't think I'm ready for a loving relationship yet. I get that text. I head back to my city. I think about this a lot sometimes. It just refuses to leave me. I have disturbing fever dreams about my incidents that she's narrated to me. I am unable to go on dates anymore. It's been 2 months since this has happened, and I just hope I'll recover soon. When I was about 21 years old, I served tables at a pizza chain restaurant at a new shopping center near where I lived in the evenings and weekends. It was a part-time job for me. I was opening staff at this brand new place and it was very popular at the time. There were several shifts of employees and had a few trainers that came from other locations nearby and stayed to work at the brand new location. One of these cooks' names was John. He was only a couple of years older than me. He was a kitchen manager or similar. When I would forget to ring something in or make a mistake and he was working, I'd go back to the kitchen and tell him, and he would often help me or give me extra sauce. Whatever, usually he was doing inventory or paperwork type stuff, like food temp checks, etc. He was really nice to me, never raised his voice or got mad. He was a really soft-spoken, quiet guy. I was engaged at the time and there was no flirting or anything. He was quiet, didn't seem interested in me like that or whatever, just did his job and we would briefly chat when we worked the same schedule. I quit about 4 to 5 months after opening the restaurant and didn't stay in contact with most of the staff, including him. Well, fast forward about a month or two after I quit, and I was reading a news article, and the name in the article was the same name as the guy I'd worked with, and he had starved his stepson to death and kept him in a locked closet. I looked it up and his picture came up, and it was the same guy. I was dumbfounded. He had gotten custody of his ex-girlfriend's child who had no blood relation to him, although there was another younger boy in the home who was John's biological child, I believe a half-brother. He also had a lived-in girlfriend who was no blood relation to either child. The boy was like 30 pounds total when he was found at 7 years old. This poor child was made to use a litter box the last few weeks of his life, kept in a small linen closet. And to think, his stepfather was a cook. If there were money issues, he could have easily taken food from the restaurant. Nobody would have known. Employees got a free meal each shift. He had so many ways to feed this child. He was sentenced to life in prison. I still think of this poor kid who never had a chance, and about the guy who had hurt him, who was unassuming, friendly but quiet or shy, and capable of a job and training others for it. What is wrong with people like him? What made him think, like, you deserve this? It still haunts me to this day. How did this happen? And how did this man have so much hate in his heart? And to convince an adult woman of the same, to not get him help. Morale is, I guess you never really can judge a book by its cover. This happened a handful of years ago. We had a transfer come on the team for another department within the company. He was nearly completely deaf, meaning he could hear really, really loud noises, but nothing else. He did quite well speaking out loud, and he read lips to understand what was being said to him. No big deal, it was just an easy adjustment to make, since you faced him when talking and talked one at a time. He was a decent team member in the beginning, but after a while started making comments to me and the only other female on the team. Things like, "Why haven't you made the coffee yet?" and just other stupid old school jokes that made fun of women. My role gave him instructions on customer requests and needs. He would often not follow the instructions and I would get calls from customers complaining. Often I had to let him know that he had to go back and fix the work so it matched the original request. Afterwards, he would storm into my office and yell at me as if his inability to read and follow simple instructions were my fault. I got tired of it and said, "Do your job right the first time and there wouldn't be complaints." This, of course, didn't go over well with him. His anger was very unnerving. I got the feeling it wasn't going to stop there. In the following weeks, he would intentionally block doorways that I would be trying to go through. One time, I was in the other female worker's small office and he blocked the entire doorway. He stood there and smiled this super creepy smile as if he were saying, "What are you going to do about it?" I refused to touch him to try and push past him. The other lady kept looking at me like she was beyond uncomfortable too. It was like we read each other's minds, and we kept having our own conversation about something work-related and ignored him. After several minutes, he left. Another time, I had to go to the far back of the warehouse to organize some stuff in the room. I remember going in and thinking, okay, there are 2 cameras and they can see this main hallway, but not between the shelving units. I had the uneasy feeling that he would come back there. Sure enough, a few minutes later, he came barging in the room and came right at me. I had already been on high alert, so I quickly exited the other door in the room and booked it back to where the rest of the team was. I pulled up the security cameras to see if he had a reason to be in there. Sure enough, he paced in the room for a few minutes after I bolted and then he left. He clearly had no reason to be in there that exact moment I was. I shared this with a male coworker friend, and he said he would go back with me to any of the spaces away from the main team areas. I had to get my work done, but I didn't trust I could do it without this angry guy finding me. Anytime we would make comments about his anger or demeaning jokes, the managers would say, "Oh, maybe he didn't understand because he talks too fast," or "I bet it was just a misunderstanding," as if having a disability means you can't also be a disgusting person. Not too long after that, I heard from a teammate that this angry guy had grabbed the other female's upper thigh, literally right below a private area, squeezed and said, "Does this make you uncomfortable?" Then laughed. A few teammates witnessed it but didn't know what to do as the other female worker froze up. I immediately went to HR and told them everything he had been doing to intimidate, belittle, trap, and of course, the sexual harassment. He was fired the next day. When they escorted him out, he yelled, "This is retaliation." HR asked me what I would make of that comment, and all I could think was that it had to do with me standing my ground with him. I was so scared to see him show up unexpectedly. I told my family what he looked like, his tattoos, the car he drove, anything that would identify him since they never met him. I blocked him from every social media platform too. After he was let go, other females came forward and shared things he said or did to them too. They had told managers, but they dismissed it because the guy is deaf and they didn't want to deal with any lawsuits. As much as I hate what he did to my coworker, I'm grateful it gave that final boost to get him fired. This might not be as scary as the other stories on here, but it gives me the jeebies. My uncle was the main male figure in my life growing up, as I had a single mom. He was always a bit out there, but to me, I thought of him just as my crazy uncle and I trusted him. However, this changed pretty quickly after this story. My uncle owned a boat and he used to take me and my siblings out around where we live in Australia. 14-year-old me, who had been awkwardly talking to my crush before going back to the boat. My uncle started pestering me straight away, asking me who he was and if he was my boyfriend or not. I thought it was weird and told him so. I was being sassy, but he took it in a way I didn't expect and seemed genuinely annoyed. We got into an argument and I ended up leaning over the side of the boat sulking. He told me several times to stop it. Suddenly, he pushed me and held my head underwater. I thought it was a bad joke at first, but he held me under for way too long. I started panicking and my vision was blurring. He then let me go and started laughing at me. I was obviously terrified and upset and immediately told my mom, but my uncle said that I was lying and just wanted attention. My mom didn't believe me. I never trusted him again after this, and I still have a bad fear of water. I'd always blame myself for what happened on the boat because I was talking back to him. My crush ended up becoming my boyfriend, and he never liked my uncle either and told me so. My uncle was always picking fights with him. I have twin sisters who are around 2 years younger than me. Because I'm the big sister, I used to shelter them from him the best that I could. But they were old enough to know what was up. It wasn't a normal relationship between me and my uncle, and he used to call me dumb to my face, but tell others that I was naive and immature for my age. He also used to play fight with us a lot. On more than one occasion, he has pulled us on his lap and tickled us and wouldn't let go until we literally had to fight him to get off. My sisters and I try to not speak to him, obviously, but he still tries to contact us. He's not related to us by blood, but it doesn't make it any better. My aunt, mom's sister, also told me that he and his brother were arrested in the late 80s or early 90s for threatening to shoot their brother's ex-girlfriend. I don't know the full story behind that one. I'm 19 now and I'm so angry that I've never reported him or told anyone apart from friends. I still panic when water is over my head.